Xiao Ran felt the changes within himself. After absorbing Yang Wenqi's powers, he had undergone an overall enhancement. His physique was comprehensively strengthened. He could clearly feel his strength increasing, his nerve responses sharpening, and he believed his speed had improved as well. Moreover, this was just the beginning. Previously, after absorbing the mutated husky's abilities, it had taken his body 2 days to complete the enhancement. If it was the same this time, the effects would last for about 2 days. The most direct change was to his superpowers, which was an immediate upgrade. His space gate could now open to a maximum size of 15 by 15 meters, though the maximum casting distance remained unchanged at 4 meters. Also, the limit of his spatial perception had increased to over 7 meters. Although he hadn't tested how many times he could use it or for how long he could sustain it, it was definitely more and longer than before. Undeniably, a smile appeared on Xiao Ran's face. Just for this gain, his trip to Su University had already been a huge win. There was just one downside. After absorbing abilities, he would become incredibly aroused, especially after the second time. If he didn't release it on the spot, he felt like he would explode. It wasn't that he was lecherous, it was just that he couldn't control it at that moment. So, did this mean he had to bring a woman with him whenever he went out? Otherwise, what would he do if there were no women around? An inflatable doll? He shivered. No, better not. Seeing the fluctuating expressions on Xiao Ran's face, Su Qingmei naturally didn't dare say a word, afraid of drawing his attention. What if this guy wasn't fully satisfied and suddenly got the urge to take her in the car? Could she resist? Setting aside whether she could even win a fight against him, just the fact that she still needed Xiao Ran's help to find her sister and get them both out of here meant she couldn't dare make any demands of him. The car continued onward, heading west. After 2 turns, they arrived at the west cafeteria. However, it was completely different from the east cafeteria. Most of the windows here were broken, and the walls were pockmarked, as if it had gone through a war. What happened here? Xiao Ran stopped the car. Su Qingmei couldn't hold back any longer and jumped out, running towards the cafeteria. Xinran! Su Xinran! She yelled. The cafeteria door opened just then, and she rushed inside. Xiao Ran followed, strolling in casually, but his nerves were stretched taut. He didn't know if there might be another superpowered individual here. Even if not, ordinary people shouldn't be underestimated. If someone grabbed a club and whacked you from behind, even with powers, you could be taken down in one hit. After all, Xiao Ran wasn't like the mutated husky, whose body was specifically enhanced. His defense and recovery speed were nowhere near comparable. Sister, as Xiao Ran walked into the cafeteria, he heard a joyful cry. He saw Su Qingmei tightly hugging another girl. Coincidentally, this girl was facing him, so he got a clear look at her. Beautiful. Su Qingmei was already very pretty, a solid 9 out of 10, truly top tier. But Su Xinran was even more beautiful by a couple of points. And being a university student, she exuded a youthful, vibrant aura, completely different from Su Qingmei, who had endured 3 or 4 years of hardship. He wondered about her figure. But if the older sister had such a good figure, the younger one probably wouldn't be any worse. Xiao Ran muttered to himself. He was definitely going to have this tender beauty. He took another look around. There were far fewer students in this cafeteria, only about 20 or so, both male and female, roughly an even split. The girls looked at him with curiosity, some with a peculiar expression. The boys' gazes were much more uniform. Hostility. Xiao Ran understood. He had arrived with Su Qingmei, and Su Qingmei was Su Xinran's sister. Therefore, it was highly likely he would take both sisters away. How could they not be jealous? Xiao Ran almost laughed. What kind of times were these? And they were still thinking about petty jealousies. It could only be said that university students were still a bit naive, a bit childish, still holding on to some hope for the future, not completely despondent. Otherwise, everyone would be thinking about how to survive, not about romance, let alone jealousy. Su Qingmei and Su Xinran talked for a while. Then the 2 women walked over to Xiao Ran. Let's go, Su Qingmei said. Su Xinran looked at Xiao Ran with gratitude and said, thank you. Su Qingmei had only told her that Xiao Ran was helping out of goodwill. Otherwise, how could she possibly let her sister sacrifice her body to save her? Xiao Ran didn't expose the truth, just smiled and said, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to leave. Sure enough, a large group of male students surrounded them. You can't leave. At least she can't leave, they said, pointing at Su Xinran. What? Su Xinran blurted out, her face full of confusion. Brother Song has his eye on you. If you leave, Brother Song will be angry, one of the male students said. Su Xinran immediately became furious. I'm not Song Hui's property. Does he control whether I leave or not? No, You're not allowed to leave, period. Several young men blocked their path, preventing the three of them from leaving. Not only can Su Xinran not go, but if you two want to leave, you have to leave the car keys behind. To have a car that could drive in such harsh weather conditions now. What did that mean? Life, freedom, and wealth. Of course, this wealth referred to supplies. And with supplies, wouldn't they be able to do whatever they wanted? So, Xiao Ran and Su Qingmei could go, but the car had to stay. In fact, it would be best if Su Qingmei stayed too. After all, she was so beautiful, only a tiny bit less so than Su Xinran. The Su sisters were naturally furious, but Xiao Ran just smiled faintly. You'd better think this through, Xiao Ran said calmly. If you try to stop me, you're standing in my way, and that makes you my enemy. And when it comes to enemies, I don't hold back. The group of college students burst into laughter. You're threatening us? With what words? Not a single one of them backed down. In fact, some even stepped forward. Not all of them, though. Xiao Ran shook his head. Without hesitation, bullets burst forth from his interdimensional space. Though the portal only appeared as a flat surface, he could summon and dismiss it instantly, wrapping it around him in an arc, which made the barrage of bullets seem like they were flowing effortlessly from his entire body. Bang, bang, bang. 11 people dropped to the ground simultaneously. Not a single scream was heard. Each had been taken out with a single headshot. No time to even cry out. 9 men, 2 women. Man or woman, it doesn't matter. If you're hostile toward me, you die. The remaining 7, 1 man and 6 women, hadn't stepped forward before. Now they screamed in terror. One girl collapsed to the ground. When her hand touched something warm and sticky, she realized it was covered in blood. Her eyes rolled back, and she fainted on the spot. 2 other girls were so frightened they wet themselves. But people react to fear in different ways. Among them, one girl's eyes gleamed, her face even showing a hint of excitement. After the battle with Yang Wenqi, Xiao Ran already knew that his identity as an awakened couldn't stay hidden from Su Qingmei. But as long as he kept quiet, who could possibly know the specifics of his abilities? Shooting bullets out of thin air, curved projectile manipulation, with spatial gateways and interdimensional storage. His powers were so mysterious and versatile that they defied explanation. Even if someone knew he could store and retrieve items with their properties intact, how could they possibly know what he might pull out next? A chunk of brick? A single bullet? 100 bullets? 1,000? Maybe even a shell? Tell me, how do you defend against that? You can't. So what exactly is his power? Guess all you want. Since there was no point in hiding anymore, Xiao Ran looked over the remaining students and asked coolly, anyone else want to try and stop me? I do. Oh, still someone with a death wish. He followed the voice and raised an eyebrow. She was stunning, just a notch below Su Xinran in terms of looks, but with a completely different vibe. Where Su Xinran was pure and elegant, this girl was oozing seduction. She raised her hand and began walking toward him, every step a calculated sway of hips, each movement radiating allure. Everyone else was bundled up in thick winter gear, looking like overstuffed snowmen, but somehow she managed to show off her curves even through the layers. Her waist must be impossibly slender to pull that off. You? Xiao Ran chuckled. This girl reeked of green tea, energy, sweet and innocent on the surface, but clearly scheming beneath. No way she was acting on impulse. She had an agenda. Big brother, she said, brushing her hair back in a clearly rehearsed motion, meant to show off her face and feminine charm in one stroke. That vehicle of yours outside is huge. Could you take me with you? My name's Zhao Yansu, she added, then shot a quick glance at Su Qingmei. Sorry, big sis. I'm just asking him for a ride. Please don't get the wrong idea. Definitely top-tier green tea behavior. Xiao Ran couldn't help but laugh. Zhao Yansu was clearly a manipulator, and a highly skilled one at that. With that one line, she'd managed to needle Su Qingmei while pretending to be all sweet and innocent. A jab and a taunt in one. Big sis, implying Su Qingmei was old. Amusing. Very amusing. Su Xinran couldn't hold back. She stepped up in defense of her sister. Zhao Yansu, knock off the flirting. He's my sister's friend. Don't try your tricks on him. In her mind, anyone who would risk themselves for her sister's sake must be her sister's boyfriend. And now this green tea, which wanted to swoop in? Zhao Yansu's eyes welled up with tears instantly. She turned those puppy dog eyes to Xiao Ran. Big brother, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause any misunderstandings. I really just want to get out of here. I didn't think things would get so out of hand. I'm sorry, really. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders trembling slightly. Paired with her watery eyes, she looked like she was crying. Su Qingmei gave a cold snort. Don't bother putting on a show for me. I'm not Xiao Ran's girlfriend. If you want to be his woman, go ahead, throw everything you've got at him. Just know this, he's quite the player. She was already his, after all. Jie. Su Xinran stomped her foot in frustration. In her eyes, her sister was just being proud and stubborn again, always keeping things bottled up, never willing to show weakness, even when she was clearly hurting. But that only made her more determined. Her sister had gone to prison for her sake. Su Xinran had to study hard, get into grad school, get a doctorate, make a ton of money, so she could give her sister the life she deserved. It would never make up for lost freedom, but it was the only thing she could do. So now, this backstabbing T, which dares to go after her sister's man. For anything else, Su Xinran wouldn't care. But when it involved her sister, she wouldn't back down an inch. She darted forward, trying to block Xiao Ran with her body. He hadn't expected her to move so suddenly, or rather, he could have avoided her easily, but chose not to. They collided. Su Xinran was light as a feather, and the impact sent her tipping backward. As the ceiling filled her view, she flailed and screamed. But before she could fall, a strong arm wrapped around her waist. Xiao Ran. He caught her, steadying her on her feet before letting go and walking past her toward Zhao Yansu. He leaned in and said quietly, "Zhou, you can come with me, but once you step inside my place, you're mine. You sure about that?" Zhao Yansu spread her fingers slightly, her big, sultry eyes shimmering, completely dry now, no trace of tears. She bit her crimson lips. "I won't let you down, big brother." Xiao Ran smiled faintly and waved his hand with vigor. "Let's go." This trip had been a huge success. He'd absorbed a new power and picked up 2 top-tier beauties. TSK, he wouldn't mind working hard to go out every day if it meant windfalls like this. Even if he picked up hundreds of beauties to take home, he could totally provide for them, and not just for a year or two, but for a lifetime. Su Xinran, on the other hand, was fuming, but what right did she have to try and persuade Xiao Ran? She could only say to Su Qingmei, "Sister, you really need to change your ways, or you'll always be the one to suffer." Su Qingmei had her own unspoken grievances. Was she supposed to explain to her sister that Xiao Ran wasn't her boyfriend, not even a friend, but merely the boss she'd sold herself to? If she really said that, her sister would probably explode, refuse to leave under any circumstances, and try to convince her to stay as well. But was Xiao Ran someone easy to reason with? He had already fulfilled his promise. So, if she dared to go back on her word, she believed Xiao Ran would ruthlessly gun down both sisters. It wasn't even out of the question that he might violate them first before killing them. She tugged her sister's hand. "Xiao Ran and I really aren't boyfriend and girlfriend. Who he wants to be with is his business. I have no right to interfere. Besides, I was the one who begged him for help. You absolutely mustn't provoke him." Su Xinran looked at her sister doubtfully, then turned to look at Zhao Yansu, her large eyes blinking, her thoughts unreadable. "So can you take me with you?" another girl suddenly asked. Xiao Ran glanced at her. A 70-pointer in terms of looks, passable as a beauty. However, his standards were higher now. A 70-pointer really didn't qualify to be taken to his villa. If Zhang Jingya and Zhong Lei hadn't joined him earlier, they probably wouldn't make the cut anymore either. He shook his head. The car can't fit this many people. There were only 4 of them. Even a regular car had 5 seats. Besides, were there even traffic cops checking for overloading these days? As long as you could cram them in, you could fit as many as you wanted. Not to mention, this was an extended G-Wagon, a 7-seater. Xiao Ran was just politely refusing. The girl's face turned a little pale, but she didn't dare say anything. After all, 11 of their classmates had just died mysteriously. The other girls were even more hesitant to speak up. At best, they were on par with this girl in terms of looks, some even less so. Naturally, they didn't want to invite humiliation. Xiao Ran smiled and said, "Let's hurry. If we delay any longer, the thick fog will return." The 3 women nodded in unison. This was indeed no laughing matter. So, the 4 of them got into the car. The moment they stepped inside, Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu were stunned. "Wow, it's so warm in here," Zhao Yansu shrieked, then looked at Xiao Ran with eyes full of adoration. "Big brother, you're amazing. I admire you so much, big brother." Although Su Xinran was equally shocked, she was disgusted by Zhao Yansu's deliberate fawning, couldn't help but snort, and turned her face away. Xiao Ran just smiled, started the car, and drove forward. The smooth road surface made it difficult to turn around, but it didn't matter. The campus roads were well connected, so after making a loop, he drove out through the school gate. Watching the school gate gradually recede into the distance, both Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu were overcome with emotion. And just as the car disappeared around a corner, a man dressed in autumn attire appeared. He couldn't help but exclaim softly, "That car from yesterday again?" He shook his head and walked onto the campus. As he passed the East cafeteria, his pace slowed slightly, a wary look on his face. However, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, until he had completely passed the cafeteria area, the expected attack never came. He paused, slightly stunned. Is Yang Wenqi napping or something? He actually didn't attack me. How strange. But no matter how curious he was, he wouldn't run into the cafeteria to check. Instead, he continued forward. Arriving at the West cafeteria, he pushed open the door and said with a smile, "I'm B.A." The CK hadn't even left his lips when he saw the bodies on the floor, strewn about haphazardly, at least 10 of them. In an instant, his brows furrowed, and his gaze became incredibly sharp. Just then, the 1 man and 5 women emerged trembling from a small room. "Brother Song," they cried out, their voices filled with fear. This man was Song Hui, a 4th-year student from the finance department. At the same time, he was also an ability user. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to move around so freely in such frigid conditions wearing only autumn clothes. Song Hui's face was grim. "What happened?" he asked. Everyone quickly chimed in, one after another. By the time they finished explaining, Song Hui's expression had become exceedingly dark. Su Xinran was gone, and Zhao Yansu was gone too. Damn it! His fist clenched tightly. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and streaks of ice began to form, originating from him. "Brother Song!" The others screamed in terror. But Song Hui paid them no mind. The bone-chilling cold quickly froze the 6 of them into ice sculptures. Only then did he say coldly, "Useless trash." He liked Su Xinran and also had designs on that vixen Zhao Yansu. However, the moral decay within the university was slower, far less realistic than the outside world. So, he had merely regarded Su Xinran as his private possession and Zhao Yansu as a meal waiting to be devoured, without resorting to force. He wanted the 2 women to willingly throw themselves into his arms. As food became scarcer, and he was the only one who could go out to find it, his position would gradually become unshakable, his authority absolute. Moreover, having gone out to search for supplies these past few days, he had discovered just how chaotic the outside world had become. He felt it was time to make a change. "Do I have any obligation to feed you all for free?" "No. So, if you want to eat the food I bring back, a simple thank you, senior brother, won't cut it. You'll have to pay a real price." But before he could implement this step, Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu had actually run off with someone else. What the hell? Wait! A shiver ran down his spine as a thought struck him. For the car to enter, it had to pass the East cafeteria first. So, that guy named Xiao Ran must have encountered Yang Wenqi. Yang Wenqi is hot-tempered and tyrannical, and a superpower prevents him from going out to find food, making him even more desperate for a vehicle. Yet Xiao Ran still drove through. This means he sucked in a sharp breath. Yang Wenqi is dead. That's why, when he returned past the East cafeteria, Yang Wenqi, uncharacteristically, hadn't attacked him. Should I go take a look? But what if it's a trap set by Yang Wenqi and Xiao Ran to lure me over? Song Hui hesitated for a moment, then decided not to act for the time being. After all, he could move freely in the severe cold. He could easily wait until tomorrow or the day after. There was no need to go today. But what if Yang Wenqi really is dead? Song Hui's eyes lit up. In that case, this campus would be his domain, and he would no longer bother with morality or worry about laws. He would demand absolute submission. Men will be my underlings. As for women, the good-looking ones will be mine, and the unattractive ones will be rewards for my men. TSK. I remember that new female teacher from the literature department is absolutely top-notch. Not only beautiful, but her figure is incredibly hot and alluring. Teacher, you're mine. Xiao Ran drove, very slowly. The sisters, Su Qingmei and Su Xinran, were both quite impatient, but didn't dare rush Xiao Ran, making their expressions rather amusing. Zhao Yansu, however, didn't mind at all. In fact, she was very proactive and bold, snatching the front passenger seat. Her excuse? To let the reunited Su sisters sit together and catch up. Her maneuvering was truly something. She clearly wanted to create an opportunity to get closer to Xiao Ran, yet she made it seem like she was thinking of others. TSK, impressive. Throughout the journey, she chatted idly with Xiao Ran, subtly flattering him. Even when Xiao Ran gave only brief replies, she would erupt in delicate laughter, covering her mouth and cooing, "Am I laughing in a very unladylike way? I'm not usually like this, but who can help it when Big Brother is so amusing?" Su Xinran rolled her eyes dramatically in the back seat. You green tea. It's so hot in the car. Zhao Yansu then deliberately took off her coat, revealing a snow-white sweater underneath. Judging by the neckline, she was likely wearing more than one layer, yet her chest still jutted out in an exaggerated curve. And her waist? Still incredibly slender. What a figure, absolutely stunning. No wonder she could exude such captivating allure even in winter clothes. Her figure is too good, almost unbelievably so. It defied logic. A flicker of heat flashed in Xiao Ran's eyes, which Zhao Yansu sharply caught. She lightly brushed her hand against him. What a little temptress. However, Xiao Ran decisively grabbed her hand and put it back where it belonged. He couldn't be disturbed while driving. After all, among thousands of roads, safety comes first. He had no desire to die young with so many supplies. Nearly 2 hours later, they finally returned to the residential complex. However, a wall had appeared at the main entrance. This wall was shoddily built, a haphazard pile of junk, furniture, appliances, and concrete blocks. But it was a good 3 meters deep. Even with the G-Wagon's horsepower, it probably couldn't break through. Just then, 7 men rushed out from the guardhouse, holding wool clamps, clearly intending to immobilize the G-Wagon. With that, where could Xiao Ran escape? If nothing else, they could slowly starve him out. Xiao Ran didn't even need to think. It had to be the gang from Building 4. Their attempt to borrow the car had failed, and now their true, malicious intentions were revealed. Xiao Ran shook his head. You guys really haven't learned your lesson. Fine, you wouldn't hide it anymore. Boom. A rocket materialized out of thin air and shot towards the main gate. A deafening explosion rang out. The wall at the entrance vanished. The shockwave blasted the men rushing from the guardhouse. Some were slammed against walls. Others landed on top of the perimeter fence, their clothes pierced by sharp objects, left hanging, while others were thrown to the ground, unconscious. This was like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Su Qingmei and the other 2 women gaped, looking as if they'd seen a ghost. And why wouldn't they be? A rocket isn't as fast as a bullet, and it's quite large. They had all clearly seen it materialize in front of the car, then shoot forward, instantly annihilating everything in its path. Zhao Yansu was the first to react. She launched herself from the passenger seat at Xiao Ran, throwing her arms around his neck and screaming, Big brother, you're amazing. I was scared to death just now. I thought the bad guys were going to get us, and I'd never see you again. With that, she showered his face with kisses. Could you blame her? Not really. After a near-death escape, wasn't it normal to be a little overly excited? It was just that the Su sisters' expressions weren't too pleased. From Su Qingmei's perspective, she was the one who had brought Xiao Ran here, and she had even paid a physical price for it. You've benefited so much, and now you're trying to steal my man? And Su Xinran? She had always been at odds with Zhao Yansu. It used to be Zhao Yansu trying to steal her boyfriends. Was she now targeting her sister's man? Unacceptable. Both sisters glared daggers at Zhao Yansu. Hiss, that little vixen really knew how to use her assets. Xiao Ran patted Zhao Yansu and said with a smile, Sit down. Okay, big brother. A green tea, like her, was an expert at reading expressions. Seeing the murderous glint in Xiao Ran's eyes, Zhao Yansu immediately and obediently agreed, settling back into her seat. Xiao Ran drove into the residential complex. His eyes scanned around, searching for any sign of the other people from Building 4. However, the earlier explosion seemed to have terrified them, as he didn't see anyone. Spatial sense? Firstly, the distance was considerable, and secondly, there were doors in the way. This ability wasn't X-ray vision. It couldn't see through walls. He wondered if, after absorbing a few more abilities, it might upgrade to be able to penetrate walls. Something to look forward to. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. With his current firepower, he could take out anyone from Building 4 who dare to show themselves, one by one. Come on, let's play this out slowly. I have plenty of food and water. What about you? Xiao Ran drove to the villa, opened the garage door by remote control, drove in, and then locked it. The garage door was made of special alloy, 20 centimeters thick, incredibly heavy, and took about 2 minutes to open or close. Let's go inside, Xiao Ran said, opening his car door and getting out. Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu were both reluctant to leave the car because it was so warm inside. The house, on the other hand, they remembered vividly how cold it had been where they were staying before. But Su Qingmei pulled her sister, leading her out of the car. Zhao Yansu had no choice but to get out too. Huh. She was immediately stunned. The house was even warmer than the car. Heavens, what kind of magical place was this? In fact, it wasn't just warm. It was so hot she felt like taking off her clothes. Led by Xiao Ran, They entered the villa's living room. Jiang Yuning was already waiting for them. And Baozi wagged its tail and came up to greet them, sniffing at the three women. Sigh. 3 more mistresses. The doggo was under a lot of pressure, having to remember so many new scents. Although Jiang Yuning knew Xiao Ran had gone to help Su Qingmei find someone, she hadn't expected him to bring back 2 beauties. These 2 women clearly looked like university students, full of youth and vitality. One was pure like a white lotus, while the other was as alluring as a little temptress. Instantly, a strong sense of crisis welled up in her. Someone had come to compete for favor. She sized up Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu, and they in turn were sizing her up, equally stunned by her beauty. What a beautiful woman. Go take a shower, both of you. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu hadn't bathed in days. It wasn't so bad with their jackets on, but once they took them off, even the most fragrant beauties would have a hint of sweat. Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu both blushed, then exclaimed in unison, "We can actually shower. Go ahead." Xiao Ran directed the 2 women to different shower rooms. Each floor had one, with its own water source and a booster pump, so there was no worry about multiple people using water simultaneously and reducing the flow. When Xiao Ran returned, Su Qingmei bit her lip, looked at him, and said, "You have superpowers just like that Yang Wenqi." Yes. Xiao Ran no longer hid it. There was no point. However, he would only reveal his secrets selectively. He wouldn't mention how many spatial abilities he had developed, nor would he fully disclose what his interdimensional space could do. What he showed was just enough to make the women utterly devoted to him. So, he swiped his hand over the table, and a boxed meal instantly appeared. Another swipe, and a carton of milk materialized. A third swipe produced some fruit. Even though Su Qingmei had her suspicions, her jaw dropped, her shock beyond words. Xiao Ran walked over and leaned in, whispering in her ear, "I have endless supplies, enough for everyone here to eat for several lifetimes. And energy, too, enough to ensure this place always has heating and power. Now, reconsider. Do you still want to take your sister and leave? Ask yourself, where could you possibly go if you left here? How would you find food? Clean water? Would you find an environment this warm? Would you be able to shower? Or do you and your sister fancy becoming primitives, living off raw meat and blood?" Su Qingmei's delicate frame trembled, her long eyelashes fluttering. She turned to Xiao Ran, her voice weak. "So, when I begged you to help find my sister, you already had this planned?" "How could I?" Xiao Ran chuckled. "It's been over 20 days since the apocalypse. Honestly, the chances of your sister being dead were much higher. Why would I scheme for a dead person?" Su Qingmei leaned weakly into Xiao Ran's embrace. So, he had considered her his prize all along. But could she refuse? Reality was too cruel. Even if she was tough now, and could probably take down an adult man one-on-one if it came to a fight, who fought one-on-one these days? Look at the gang from Building 4. Didn't they always move as a group? It was like that in this complex, so how could other places be any different? What if there were other superpowered individuals? With social order collapsed, and the law of the jungle reigning supreme, who would bother reasoning with you? If they wanted you, they'd just take you. Only Xiao Ran would bother to negotiate, to make a deal. Would anyone else go to such trouble? If she had to depend on someone, was there a better choice than Xiao Ran? First, he could provide the best living conditions. Second, he at least showed respect on the surface, not forcing her to follow, but enticing her, giving her the illusion of choice, right? "You win," she said, closing her eyes. Jiang Yuning watched from the side, completely unsurprised by this outcome. What woman could refuse Xiao Ran? None, unless she was also an ability user, capable of fending for herself. But those were probably as rare as phoenix feathers. Xiao Ran smiled and took out a pile of clothes for her. "Take these to your sister. Throw out her old clothes." Okay. Su Qingmei took the clothes and headed to the first floor shower room. Xiao Ran kissed Jiang Yuning on the cheek, then went upstairs to the second floor. Splish splash. The sound of running water filled the air. Xiao Ran undressed, pulled open the shower room door, and walked in. You bad boy. How could you come in now? You scared me to death." Zhao Yansu quickly covered herself with a towel. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "You can use your green tea act on other women. I don't mind you all vying for favor, but there's no need for it with me. I personally dislike manipulative green tea types." Zhao Yansu immediately flashed a seductive smile, all traces of shyness gone. Xiao Ran asked, "Why did you choose to come back with me? Tell me the truth. Don't try to be clever with me." Zhao Yansu quickly replied, "First, you drove a car here. In the current conditions, most cars would skid and crash into a wall the moment you start them. but you drove here steadily. That car alone guarantees you can get enough supplies. Xiao Ran nodded. That was indeed true. Second, I smell shampoo in Su Xinran's hair. At the time, I just guessed she had washed her hair. I never imagined she could actually take a hot shower. But even if it was just washing her hair, being able to use water so lavishly now is incredible. You're quite observant. If anyone dares call you just a pretty face, I'll be the first to disagree. Is there a third reason? He asked. Yes, Zhao Yansu continued. You came from the East Cafeteria? There's a guy there, Yang Wenqi. After the apocalypse, he seemed to mutate. He has superpowers just like Song Hui. He even fought Song Hui over ownership of the convenience store, and they became enemies. Did you notice the dents and pits on the cafeteria building? Yang Wenqi made those by throwing rocks from a distance. You came in through the main gate, so you must have gone to the East Cafeteria first to ask around. But you came out with both people in the car. Heh, knowing Yang Wenqi's personality, how could he possibly not try to seize the vehicle? So, there's only one possibility. You took care of Yang Wenqi. What a clever girl. Xiao Ran was even more pleased with her. This wasn't just a pretty face. She was talented, capable of using her brain and acting coy. Mine. Xiao Ran was somewhat surprised. Zhao Yansu, unexpectedly, was still a virgin. Find it strange, don't you? Zhao Yansu said, wrapping her jade-like arms around him. I look so seductive. How could I possibly still be a virgin? Xiao Ran chuckled. No, I wouldn't say you're seductive. Rather, your green tea act is top-notch. I'm guessing the men around you just weren't enough to truly capture your interest. You have higher ambitions, right? You're as perceptive as ever. Big brother, you guessed perfectly. Zhao Yansu praised. I'm no mere arm candy, you know? I got into Su University on my own merit. If my parents hadn't wanted me to study so far from home, I could have easily gotten into Nan University with my grades. Xiao Ran gave her a thumbs up. Impressive. His own grades were good, but only enough to get him into Su University. A truly gifted woman. I studied so hard precisely to cultivate this talented woman persona. That's the only way to marry into a truly wealthy and powerful family. Zhao Yansu giggled. So, all that hard studying wasn't because I wanted to be some career woman and earn my own money. Unfortunately, the cataclysm struck and all my plans went up in smoke, she said with a touch of regret. If I'd known this would happen, I wouldn't have buried myself in books. Sigh. To be honest, I actually hate studying. I much prefer going out to have fun. Xiao Ran smiled. This woman was so determined to marry into wealth that she'd meticulously preserved her virtue. Heh, all the better for him. Xiao Ran found it amusing, bringing a green tea like her into the fold. With the Su Qingmei sisters, Jiang Yuning, and now her, for women under one roof would make for quite the drama. It would certainly be incredibly entertaining. What other entertainment was there in these times? Watching this green tea verbally spar with the other three women would surely be a spectacle. He helped Zhao Yansu downstairs. Seeing their intimacy, anyone who wasn't a complete idiot could guess what had transpired between them upstairs. No wonder Xiao Ran had asked for clothes to be brought upstairs. But while the other three women each had their own thoughts, which of them was in any position to criticize? This included Su Xinran. Just moments before, Su Qingmei had laid out the situation for her and presented her with two choices. First, to stay in the villa, in which case she would have to become Xiao Ran's woman. Second, to leave. If Su Xinran chose to leave, Su Qingmei would accompany her sister, even if it meant freezing or starving to death or facing any other misfortune. They would bear it together. Su Xinran's immediate choice, naturally, was to leave. Heavens, what kind of era was this for a group of women to still be vying for a single man's favor, for sisters to even consider sharing the same man? But then, Su Qingmei had told her some things. For example, the atrocities committed in Building No. For murder, cannibalism. Women were the most vulnerable. They would be violated and abused before being killed. Within the school grounds, some semblance of order and morality might still exist, but that was a naivety exclusive to the students. Outside, it was the law of the jungle. The weak were meat for the strong. Su Xinran sat there, stunned, saying she needed some time to consider. But now, seeing Zhao Yansu and Xiao Ran so intimate, she couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. And when she saw Xiao Ran lay out a table laden with delicious dishes, Su Xinran's resolve wavered even more. In the 20-odd days since the cataclysm, what had she been eating every day? Leftovers, cold food. Even then, they had to ration everything. Later, when the toxic hailstorm stopped, Song Hui had been able to go out and forage for food, but it was only ever cold bread or instant noodles. How long had it been since she'd last eaten a proper, hot meal? let alone a spread as lavish as this. Xiao Ran then leaned close to Su Qingmei's ear and whispered, "My food is only for my women. If your sister isn't willing to strike a bargain with me, then you'll take her place. So, after this meal, you'll owe me 4 days." What could Su Qingmei do? She could only nod in acceptance. She was already so deep in debt. What did a little more matter? She had resigned herself to her fate. "Let's eat." The 5 of them sat down. The dining table normally seated 6, but could be extended for 10, so there was plenty of room. Xiao Ran, long accustomed to such fine food, ate casually. But for the Su Qingmei sisters and Zhao Yansu, this was their first time partaking in such a feast since the apocalypse, and they were overcome with a mixture of shock and euphoria. Zhao Yansu, especially, felt immensely glad she'd made her choice. She had played her cards right, and her gamble had paid off. Even Jiang Yuning, who hadn't eaten well in a long time either, was hardly more composed than the other 3. As a result, hardly anyone spoke during the meal. The only sound was the crisp clinking of chopsticks against bowls. After the meal, Xiao Ran brought out fruit. The room was warm, over 20 degrees Celsius. The women had eaten ravenously and quickly, and were all slightly perspiring. Combined with the scalding hot chicken soup that had warmed them through, the platter of cool, refreshing fruit now presented with sheer perfection. It moved them so much they felt like crying. When they had finished, Xiao Ran arranged their sleeping quarters. All 4 women were assigned rooms on the 2nd floor, 1 for each of them. Xiao Ran's own room was on the 3rd floor. And, naturally, he could choose to spend the night in any of their rooms whenever he pleased. Since the bowls and chopsticks could be directly stored into his dimensional space without needing to be washed, Xiao Ran had the 4 women watch some TV. After a little over an hour, he sent them off to bed. There had been enough wildness for one day. So, Xiao Ran wasn't planning any further activities for the night. He had their doors shut and locked. Only he could open them now. That night, everyone in Building 4 trembled, utterly terrified. Was that a rocket? That had to be a rocket launcher. Someone shrieked hysterically. "This is insane. How did that guy get his hands on a rocket launcher?" Lu Yang was much calmer. Though he was scared stiff himself, as the leader of this group, if he panicked, the team would fall apart. He analyzed, that guy can go outside. And you all know, there's a military garrison in the mountains near Su City. "You mean Xiao Ran got the rocket launcher from the army?" Sun Wentao asked. Before Lu Yang could agree, Sun Wentao nodded. That would explain how he got it. But did he just happen to have a rocket launcher in his car? It was too much of coincidence. They had just blocked his door, and then Xiao Ran pulls out a rocket launcher. Lu Yang waved his hand dismissively. "Don't get hung up on such details," he said gravely. "The point is, if Xiao Ran got a rocket launcher, wouldn't he have gotten other weapons too? What kind of weapons don't they have in the army? Pistols, rifles, machine guns." With every weapon he named, the group shivered. "So what do we do? Do we have to steer clear of Xiao Ran from now on?" Everyone muttered. Xiao Ran had a villa with lights, heating, and the most beautiful woman in the complex, Hanyan. They were green with envy, consumed by jealousy. But now, the firepower Xiao Ran possessed was enough to plunge them into deep despair. The more they thought about it, the more agitated and frustrated they became. Hanyan. They all dreamed of fucking Hanyan. But now, only Xiao Ran got to use her, treat her like a plaything, make her contort into any position he desired. The very thought of it drove them insane with jealousy. "Son of a bitch," someone cursed under their breath. "What should we do?" Everyone looked at Lu Yang. Lu Yang reached for a cigarette, but found nothing. He'd smoked his last one that morning. He stroked his chin. "Tonight, let's attack another building first. As for Xiao Ran, we'll put him aside for now and figure something out later." How could they fight someone who likely had a submachine gun when they were practically barehanded? Ma Junkai said, "The other buildings aren't easy targets anymore. They've already barricaded their stairwells and posted guards. We have no chance of clearing the obstacles and breaking in." Lu Yang smirked. "2 plans. First, we attack from the outside. We just need to stack up furniture and other things. It won't be hard to climb to a 2nd-floor window. The only problem is it's freezing at night, so we'd be risking severe cold." Everyone slowly nodded. Lu Yang's method was good, but the nights were indeed too cold. A little too long out there, and you could freeze to death. "Second, we go in through the elevator shaft," Lu Yang said casually. "First, we get the elevator car to the 1st-floor level. Then, we set up an extendable ladder. Once we pry open the 2nd-floor elevator doors, we can waltz right in." Brilliant. Everyone nodded. No wonder Lu Yang was the boss. Look at that brain, so sharp. All right, let's get ready. We move in half an hour. Yeah, we're tired of those women anyway. Time for some new ones to play with. Half an hour later, The men from Building 4 set out and stealthily broke into Building 5. However, after Building 4's 2 previous massacres, everyone in the other buildings was on guard. At the very least, every household had prepared weapons, kitchen knives, clubs, and the like. When the residents of Building 5 heard the commotion and woke up, they managed to mount a decent counterattack. Everyone knew the people from Building 4 were animals. Falling into their hands meant either death or a fate worse than death. So, everyone fought for their lives. In contrast, did the Building 4 group have any reason to fight to the death? One side was desperate, the other wasn't. So the outcome was hardly surprising. The raid ended with Building 4's retreat. However, both sides suffered many casualties. Building 5's losses were more severe, as they were ambushed first before they could organize a defense, making heavier losses inevitable. When Xiao Ran woke up, he heard a commotion in the residential complex. Everyone was discussing something, sounding very excited. Previously, Building 4 had actually wiped out Building 3 and Building 12, leaving an impression of being terrifying and unbeatable. But now, their myth of invincibility was shattered. The people from Building 4 were human too. They didn't have 2 extra arms or 3 eyes. So, Building 5's defensive battle last night was incredibly morale-boosting. After Xiao Ran learned what had happened, he couldn't help but smile. Time to add some fuel to the fire, he thought. He grabbed a megaphone, opened his window, and turned the volume to maximum. Dear neighbors, it's time for everyone's favorite event. Bounty announcements. In light of Building 4's hostile actions against me yesterday, I'm issuing the following bounty. For every person from Building 4 killed, bring me their body or head, and you will receive 1 kilogram of food and 1 bottle of purified water. This bounty is ongoing and will only expire once every last person from Building 4 is dead. As his voice fell, cheers erupted throughout the entire complex. You see, the people from Building 4 had already become public enemies of the complex. Everyone wanted them eliminated, but without any incentive, who would be willing to risk their lives fighting them? Xiao Ran's bounty, however, filled that gap perfectly. Kill 1 person from Building 4, get 1 kilogram of food and a bottle of clean water. This meant, if eaten sparingly, it could last at least 3 days. 3 days of survival. For residents lacking food and clean water, could there be a greater temptation? Instantly, residents began discussing tactics building by building, preparing to unite with people from other blocks to hunt down those from Building 4. As for whether Xiao Ran would go back on his word, so far, Xiao Ran had honored every bounty he'd ever issued. He never made empty promises. So it was on. Building 4. Everyone was trembling. Yesterday, they fought Building 5. Even though they had the advantage of a sneak attack, they were still repelled. If one building could do that, how could they possibly stand against the entire complex united? What do we do? Everyone was incredibly anxious, looking at Lu Yang. Inwardly, Lu Yang was cursing Xiao Ran. If it weren't for that bastard's announcement, how would his group have ended up in such a desperate situation? Back to Building 4, he declared decisively. Building 4 had been sealed off, so after they got out, they had moved into Building 12 to avoid climbing through windows every time they entered. Building 4 is sealed. The windows are now the only way in or out. It's easy to defend and hard to attack. So, as long as we defend those windows, we don't need to fear them, even if the entire complex, or even all of Sioux City, comes for us. After hearing his analysis, the people from Building 4 all nodded. Although it meant being trapped again, it was better than being hunted down out here. However, B-Boss, people from the other buildings, they're already attacking. Someone burst into report, his face deathly pale. Xiao Ran closed the door, shutting out the invading chill and, with it, concealing his deeds and reputation. Let them cause a ruckus. Let them kill. The fire had been fueled, so let the bullets fly for a while. Let's see how this all played out. He pondered for a moment, then made a decision. Opening the basement door, he brought Han Yun and the other 3 women up to the ground floor. These 4 women hadn't seen sunlight for many days, and prolonged lack of natural light could cause health problems. Although these 4, perhaps due to their looks or their untouched status, couldn't quite be classified as prime, he'd been with them for so long. Firstly, he developed some affection for them, and secondly, Xiao Ran wasn't tired of them yet. At least Han Yun and Wong Lulu were top class in terms of looks and figure. That being the case, he couldn't just keep them locked in the basement forever, could he? Now that the villa was spacious enough, he might as well let them live upstairs. However, if anyone dared to disobey Xiao Ran's rules, then sorry, no matter how prime you were, you could get lost. Hearing they could move upstairs, Han Yun and the other 3 women were naturally overjoyed. But when they stepped out of the basement and came face to face with Su Qingmei and her 3 companions, they were all somewhat surprised and awkward. To be able to live here, what kind of relationship did that imply with Xiao Ran? Did it even need to be said? So, they were all his people. 8 women serving 1 man. It was naturally awkward as hell. Xiao Ran chuckled. Come, let's have breakfast together. He wasn't hiding things anymore. He began to arrange a buffet on the bar counter. Help yourselves to whatever you want. There's bread, noodles, and wontons. He also put out milk, yogurt, coffee, and other items, not much different from a hotel's buffet breakfast. Su Qingmei and her group had already witnessed this the previous night, but Han Yun and her companions hadn't. Each of them stared wide-eyed, finding it utterly incredible. You. They looked at Xiao Ran as if they were seeing a god. Eat up, Xiao Ran said with a smile. The 8 women needed to get along, at least amicably on the surface. As for what happened in private, vying for favor and jealousy were their own business. Once everyone had finished eating, Xiao Ran whispered something in Su Qingmei's ear. Su Qingmei's pretty face flushed red. She stood up and went upstairs with Xiao Ran. Now that her younger sister had been found, she too had to fulfill her promise to Xiao Ran. Sister. Su Xinran couldn't help but call out, naturally understanding what was about to happen. But could she stop it? On what ground were they living here? Let alone Su Qingmei. Even she herself had to fulfill her promise. Otherwise, why would Xiao Ran support someone unrelated to him? Rice was so precious these days, not to mention meat. And what about seafood like king crabs? Even other ability users probably didn't have the privilege of eating such things. This world was fair. You reaped what you sowed, or rather, for every benefit you received, you had to pay a price. An hour later, Xiao Ran came downstairs. Has anyone come to claim the bounty during this time? No. The 6 women shook their heads in unison. However, just by opening a window, they could hear the intense sounds of fighting and shouting. So, there were definitely casualties by now, and people must have died in Building 4. Those in the residential complex would likely need to discuss how to divide the spoils of war afterwards, which was why no one had come to claim his bounty yet. I don't have time to wait around for you people. Xiao Ran decided to make another trip to Su University. If possible, he wanted to acquire another ability. Xiao Ran decided to go to Su Da's East Campus again. He had come to a realization. In an apocalypse like this, he had to constantly grow stronger. Therefore, every ability user was a potential source of power for him. Since he knew of Song Hui's existence, how could he not go check it out? If he got the chance, he'd take the guy out and absorb his powers. Xiao Ran glanced at the women. He'd originally wanted to bring one of them along. What if, after absorbing Song Hui's powers, he was overcome with lust again? If there were no women around then, would he really have to rely on his own hand? However, he then thought, this was Su University? Would such a large school be short on women? He might even be able to bring back a few more top-tier ones. Yes, it definitely had to be top-tier. The villa wasn't small, but it wasn't exactly huge either. If a few more women moved in, not only would the basement have to be occupied again, but some of them might even have to share beds. Xiao Ran couldn't help but smile. The villa should be sufficient for the short term, but it was hard to say for the long run. He'd either have to stop hoarding goddesses or find a bigger place. But if he were to move, was there really a better option than the villa right now? Xiao Ran shook his head, deciding not to dwell on that for now. Instead, he said to the women, if anyone comes to claim their reward, tell them I've gone out. I'll notify everyone when I get back. Okay. The women all nodded. Xiao Ran went to the garage, got into his G-Wagon, opened the garage door, and slowly drove out. He then closed the garage door, and only once it was fully shut did he step on the gas. Safety first. He couldn't let anyone raid his base. There were 6 top-tier women in the villa now. If any one of them were kidnapped, he'd be heartbroken for a while. The G-Wagon maintained a steady 20 miles per hour as it drove out the main gate. The car's soundproofing was so good that he couldn't even hear the roaring sounds of fighting within the residential complex. However, he could clearly see fierce fighting taking place in Building 12. The people from Building 4 had already retreated to the 10th floor, while the complex's allied forces were relentless, determined to wipe out everyone from Building 4 in one fell swoop. Xiao Ran withdrew his gaze, a faint smile on his lips, and drove away coolly. After an hour's drive, he arrived at Su Da's East Campus once again. He drove in, familiar with the route. When he passed the East Cafeteria, he thought for a moment, then stopped the car and went inside. To his slight surprise, the girls who were here yesterday were all gone. Strange. He returned to his car and continued onward. However, after driving only a few dozen meters, he saw a fallen corpse. It definitely wasn't there yesterday. Although there were many bodies lying on the road, Xiao Ran's spatial awareness was incredibly sharp now. He wouldn't forget what he'd seen yesterday after just one glance. The difference compared to the current scene was immediately obvious. He stopped the car and turned the body over. Huh, this was one of the girls who had survived in the cafeteria yesterday. How'd she die here? Clearly, she froze to death. So, did they feel there was no hope staying in the cafeteria and decided to make a desperate break for it? Or were they forced out by someone? Xiao Ran got back in the car and drove on. After another few dozen meters, he found a second girl's body, then a third, and a fourth. The further he went, the more frequently the bodies appeared, and the denser they became. Eventually, he found that all the girls had frozen to death on the road. Xiao Ran couldn't help but frown. By this time, he had reached the West cafeteria. He got out of the car and went inside again. He was extremely cautious. Song Hui was an ability user who could control ice and snow. In the current environment, his powers were undoubtedly amplified. He had to be careful. He was here to take abilities, not to give his away. Reaching the cafeteria entrance, he kicked the main doors open with one blow. His physical prowess was already top tier among humans. After absorbing 2 more abilities, he had naturally surpassed that peak by a significant margin. While he couldn't compare to a mutated husky focused on physical enhancement, his strength was at least double that of a top weightlifter, his speed faster than a 100-meter sprint champion, and his endurance 2 to 3 times that of a marathon runner. Bang! As the doors flew open, Xiao Ran activated his spatial perception and simultaneously opened a spatial gate right next to the doorway. No danger. Xiao Ran walked in. There were no living people here, only a few ice sculptures. The man and 5 women from yesterday had all met their end here. Frozen into ice sculptures indoors? Must be Song Hui's handiwork. From what these people said yesterday, it was clear Song Hui had designs on Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu. He must have taken the 2 women with him. When Song Hui returned and found the remaining people here, he killed them all to vent his anger. Were the girls from the East Cafeteria also forced out by him? This guy is pretty ruthless. Xiao Ran only targeted those who were a threat to him, but Song Hui seemed to have lost all sense of right and wrong, killing in a fit of rage, regardless of innocence. Still, in the apocalypse, who cares about right and wrong anymore? Xiao Ran muttered. It's completely the law of the jungle now, survival of the fittest. Does right and wrong even matter? But in that case, where would he find Song Hui? Had he left the campus? Or was he in one of the dormitory or academic buildings? Since he was already here, Xiao Ran didn't want to leave empty-handed. So, he put his hat back on and walked towards the academic building across the way. As he passed his G-Wagon, he reached out and pressed something, and the entire vehicle vanished. There were too many people around here. He was worried it wasn't safe to leave the car parked, fearing someone might smash the windows and try to steal it. Even if it was bulletproof glass, Xiao Ran didn't want to risk any damage, as he planned to use it for a long time. He was wearing a hat and goggles now. Who could recognize him? So, even if he was seen, he wasn't afraid. Xiao Ran entered the academic building and quickly closed the door behind him. Even without heating, the temperature inside was at least 10 degrees warmer than outside. The difference was quite noticeable. Xiao Ran began searching classroom by classroom. Reaching the 3rd floor, he suddenly saw the glow of a fire. He opened the classroom door and went in. Inside, 5 students were gathered around a fire, warming themselves. Ah, no wonder so many classrooms were missing desks and chairs. They'd been brought here and burned as firewood. These 5 were 3 males and 2 females. When they saw him enter, all 5 stood up simultaneously, their expressions nervous. Xiao Ran smiled and said, "No need to be nervous, students. I just want to ask you something. Do you know Song Hui?" "Yes, we do." The 5 students nodded in unison. But one of them asked, "Who are you?" Xiao Ran took out a pack of instant noodles and a bottle of purified water, smiling. "Whoever gives me a satisfactory answer gets this pack of noodles and this water." Instantly, all 5 of them stared at him, unconsciously swallowing. "Does anyone know where Song Hui went?" Xiao Ran asked. "Me? I know. 5 students raised their hands simultaneously, looking at Xiao Ran with eager eyes. Xiao Ran casually pointed. "You tell me." It was a female student, though not at all pretty. She cleared her throat and said, "Song Hui was here not long ago. He asked us about someone's whereabouts." "Who?" Xiao Ran asked. "Professor Yu from the literature department," the girl replied. Xiao Ran paused. Why would he be asking about a professor? The girl hesitated, seeming unsure, so a boy next to her quickly raised his hand. Xiao Ran nodded. "Go ahead. I guess Song Hui has a crush on Professor Yu," the boy said. "Professor Yu is gorgeous." The dream girl of every student and teacher in the literature department. Not just the literature department. Our class isn't in literature, but we have a Marxism-Leninism class taught by Professor Yu, which guy isn't head over heels for her. They even call out Professor Yu's name in their dreams, another boy interjected. Xiao Ran couldn't help but click his tongue, asking curiously, "Is this Professor Yu really that beautiful?" "Absolutely," the three boys exclaimed in unison, their faces filled with yearning. Probably fantasizing right now, Xiao Ran thought. Xiao Ran was a little surprised. Even at a time like this, you guys still have the mind to fantasize? One person might be an exception, but all three of them? That just proves Professor Yu's charm is truly immense. "What's this Professor Yu's full name?" he asked. "Yu Nuantong," the three boys chorused again. They've probably called out Nuantong countless times in their dreams. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, then said, "Tell me more about this Professor Yu." Professor Yu just turned 27. She did her undergrad, master's, and doctorate all at this university. After getting her PhD, she stayed on to teach here, one boy eagerly explained. Professor Yu got engaged just before the new year. Her fiancé is the vice-chancellor's son, also a teacher at our school, but he teaches physics. Recently engaged? Then she might still be untouched. Xiao Ran chuckled to himself. Wait, why do I care if she's untouched or not? He must have been unconsciously swayed by the three boys' descriptions, leading him to assume Yu Nuantong was an absolute stunner. He did have a habit of collecting top-tier beauties, so he subconsciously wondered about her status. Xiao Ran nodded. "So, Song Hui want to find this Professor Yu?" "Yeah," the three boys nodded. One said, "Professor Yu is either in the Wincy building or the faculty dorms." "Right. You have to hurry and stop Song Hui. Don't let him hurt Professor Yu." The three boys were extremely anxious, seemingly more concerned about Professor Yu than the food Xiao Ran held. Xiao Ran remained non-committal. He took out 4 more packs of instant noodles and 4 bottles of water, setting them down. "One for each of you." With that, he left. As for whether any of the 5 would get greedy and try to take more, that wasn't his concern. Xiao Ran didn't ask the 5 for the specific locations of the Wincy building or the faculty dorms because he knew he was a Su University graduate. After all, it had only been 5 years. He wouldn't have forgotten that quickly. Yu Nuantong, Yu Nuantong. That name sounds a bit familiar, Xiao Ran murmured. Then his eyes lit up. Isn't she the campus belle for my year? Doing the math, they were the same age, and Yu Nuantong had also done her undergraduate studies at Su University, so they really were from the same graduating class. It was just that he had gone looking for a job after graduation, while she had pursued a combined master's and PhD program. TSK. I vaguely remember Yu Nuantong being the student representative at the graduation ceremony, giving a speech. Xiao Ran tried hard to recall, but too much time had passed. He only had a fuzzy impression. This Song Hui has really gone down the wrong path. A mere student actually wants to sleep with a professor. Such an outrageous act deserves severe punishment, which I'll be happy to deliver, he said with a smirk. After leaving the teaching building, he headed towards the Wincy building. It wasn't far, but the path outside was treacherous. Xiao Ran, naturally prioritizing safety, only reached the Wincy building after more than 10 minutes. There was a truck parked outside, right by the entrance. Xiao Ran used his spatial perception. There was no one in the truck, and the cargo compartment was empty, save for some scattered snack wrappers. When Xiao Ran walked inside and saw a vending machine, he understood. The truck must have been there to restock the machine. What rotten luck, it got caught in the toxic hailstorm, trapping the driver, truck, and cargo. Evidently, the food and water from the cargo hold had been moved. Xiao Ran nodded. So, the people here wouldn't have to worry about starving, at least, not in the short term. He walked in and was about to head up the stairs when he heard the thudding of footsteps. A group of people came rushing down from upstairs, their faces etched with fear. "Get out of the way! Move!" the person at the front yelled at Xiao Ran. "Sigh." Xiao Ran drew his pistol and aimed it forward. Instantly, the group skidded to a halt. Xiao Ran's gaze swept over them. 14 people in total, men and women, old and young. So, they were likely both teachers and students. He smiled and asked, "Do you know where Song Hui is?" Hearing his question, they all started talking at once. Song Hui has captured Professor Huang and is trying to force Professor Yu to open her door. Song Hui's gone crazy. He's actually killing people on campus. But he seems to have become superhuman. He can freeze people in ice sculptures. Xiao Ran nodded. So Song Hui hadn't succeeded yet. Good. Where are they? 3rd floor, room 305. Xiao Ran waved his gun, signaling the crowd to make way. "Hey, are you a police officer?" A girl asked bravely. No, Xiao Ran said flatly, shattering her hopes. He walked up to the path they cleared, thud, 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 reaching the second floor, then thud, 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 up to the third. Room 305. Very close. He could already hear a commotion. Xiao Ran walked over. The door was wide open. A young man was holding a slender, scholarly-looking man of about 30 hostage. Their identities were easy to guess. The young man was Song Hui, and the one being held was, naturally, Professor Huang. This Professor Huang was thin, wore glasses, and had a scholarly air about him, clearly an academic. Song Hui was completely different. He was tall and well-built. His autumn clothes couldn't hide his impressive muscles. He was either a fitness enthusiast or on a school sports team. Song Hui was saying, Professor Yu, if you don't open this door, I'm going to cut off Professor Huang's hand. He held Professor Huang tightly with one hand, while his other hand reached out, cold energy condensing into an ice blade. Nuantong, come out quickly. You Nuantong, do you hear me? Unexpectedly, Professor Huang started screaming in terror. Xiao Ran frowned. He called you Nuantong, Nuantong, instead of Teacher Yu. Could this person be Yu Nuantong's fiancé? Still, this fiancé was no good. He must have guessed what Song Hui was planning, yet he still screamed for Yu Nuantong to come out. Utterly selfish. You've truly chosen poorly, Xiao Ran thought. You've truly chosen poorly, Xiao Ran thought. Yu Nuantong, hurry up and come out. Teacher Huang shrieked repeatedly. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Song Hui was already slicing at his palm with an ice blade. Stop! A loud roar. The inner door opened, and a tall, graceful woman emerged. She was wrapped in thick fabric. On closer inspection, it wasn't winter clothing, but a curtain, roughly cut and sewn, resembling a beggar's patchwork robe cobbled together from scraps. Even so, it couldn't hide her beauty and charm. Truly stunning. Xiao Ran looked at the woman, and the hazy figure in his memory gradually sharpened, then superimposed. Yes, this was Yu Nuantong, the campus belle from his year. In Xiao Ran's mind, Yu Nuantong was on stage, giving a speech, the audience below listening intently. The girls looked at her with envy and longing, the boys with adoration. But 5 years had passed. Yu Nuantong had completely shed her youthful innocence, becoming mature and captivating, exuding the allure of a grown woman. Her figure was hidden, but he vaguely recalled she once had a rather stunning physique. Teacher Yu is quite a beauty. Song Hui's eyes were glued to Yu Nuantong. Her figure was indeed hidden, but he could see her flower-like, pretty face and her jade-like neck, making his heart pound. Teacher Huang, have you slept with Teacher Yu? He suddenly turned and asked Teacher Huang. Teacher Huang, whose name was Huang Lingcheng, was Yu Nuantong's fiancé. He shivered and quickly said, No, she's very conservative, said she wants to save it for our wedding night, so we haven't done anything. Oh, Song Hui flashed a wicked smile, looking at Yu Nuantong again. So Teacher Yu is still a virgin, huh? TSK, TSK, TSK. To find a virgin these days, and such a beautiful one at that. Teacher Yu, you're a real treasure. Yu Nuantong ignored his crass remarks, saying coolly, Let him go. Song Hui roared with laughter. Not so fast. Teacher Huang, I want to screw Teacher Yu right now. Do you agree? Wasn't this putting him on the spot? Huang Lingcheng hesitated, not answering. Song Hui began to grind his ice blade. Instantly, Huang Lingcheng's wrist was sliced open, skin and flesh parting, the pain making tears stream down his face. I agree. Huang Lingcheng screamed. Yu Nuantong looked as if she'd been dealt a heavy blow, her pretty face turning deathly pale. She had come out of the locked room, fully intending to sacrifice herself to save her fiancé. But Huang Lingcheng had sold her out without a moment's hesitation, making. Song Hui glared at Xiao Ran. Excellent. I was just wondering where to find you, and you deliver yourself to my doorstep. Xiao Ran had a working car, and had taken 2 stunning women with him. So, if he just killed Xiao Ran, all of it would be his. Of course, he first had to force Xiao Ran to reveal where he'd taken the 2 women. The car? The car must be parked outside. You can fire bullets out of thin air? Is it your superpower? Song Hui seemed a little curious. Is that how you shot Yang when she... That idiot only knew how to smash things. It's no surprise you managed to kill him. But I'm different. I can control ice and snow. I can attack and defend. So, I'll be the one killing you. Xiao Ran chuckled. Go on, try me. Rat-a-tat-tat. Hundreds of bullets instantly rained down. Song Hui stood behind an ice wall, an arrogant look on his face. I told you, my defense is damn it. Crack. The ice wall was shattered by the bullets. Song Hui hurriedly erected another ice wall, but under the barrage of firepower, it didn't even last 3 seconds before, crack, it shattered. He had no choice but to step back and create another ice wall. After creating 3 ice walls in a row, a hint of strain showed on his face. His limit wasn't just 3 ice walls, of course, but they were being destroyed far too quickly. How the hell do you have so many bullets? Even if your superpower is just spewing bullets, wouldn't firing like this drain your energy quickly? But Xiao Ran looked completely at ease, as if it wasn't taking any effort at all. He didn't dare take the risk. If Xiao Ran really broke through dozens of ice walls, he'd be turned into a pincushion. He had to attack, not just take a beating. With a thought, an ice blade materialized out of thin air beyond his ice wall and, swish, shot towards Xiao Ran. Your attack power is so strong. Your defense must be weak. That's the balance of nature. What the hell? Song Hui was dumbfounded. The ice blade had only traveled half a meter before it vanished. Vanished? Can you believe it? Did I just encounter something supernatural? Song Hui had thought he understood Xiao Ran's superpower, but the sudden disappearance of the ice blade made him realize he was wrong. Do you have 2 superpowers? He exclaimed. The infinite bullets and the ability to make ice blades disappear were completely different. No matter how he thought about it, they couldn't be the same power. How could not be shocked? Guess, Xiao Ran said with a smile. As they spoke, Song Hui erected 2 more ice walls. However, Xiao Ran's bullets kept coming. Clink, clink, clink. Another ice wall shattered. Xiao Ran wasn't worried in the slightest. Breaking 1 ice wall only took about 200 rifle rounds. And how many did he have in his interdimensional space? Millions. So, I refuse to believe I can't crack your turtle shell. Song Hui tried a few more counterattacks, but each time his ice blades were confiscated, finally making him feel fear, even despair. If this continued, he would die. Stop. I surrender, he yelled. Xiao Ran shook his head. No, I want you dead. If you don't die, how can I get your superpower? Besides, we've already come this far. You think I'd let you live to come back for revenge later? I'm not an idiot, and I'm certainly no saint. Song Hui despaired. He was clearly so powerful. With his ice superpower, he could walk through extreme cold without fear, meaning he could go anywhere in the world and obtain any resources. A great future. No, an immeasurable future lay before him. How had he ended up in such a desperate situation? I'll be your subordinate. I'll never betray you, he pleaded again, seeing no other way out. All right, drop your ice walls and kneel before me to beg for mercy, Xiao Ran said calmly. But the hail of bullets didn't stop. Song Hui was furious, cursing inwardly. How can I drop the ice walls now? That would be a death sentence. You say all right, but you really just want to kill me, don't you? I'll fight you to the death. Song Hui seethed, wanted to go all out against Xiao Ran, but what could he fight with? He could only take the hits. However arrogant he had been when facing Huang Lingwen and Yun Wantong earlier, that's how desperate he was now. He didn't want to die. He really didn't want to die. But what could he do? When dozens of ice walls had been consecutively destroyed and he could no longer erect new ones, he was directly riddled with hundreds of bullets, turning him into a bloody pincushion. Stone cold dead. Damn, that took over 10,000 of my bullets. Luckily, my superpower is special. I can prepare in advance, and it doesn't consume any energy when I use it. So theoretically, if I have enough ammo, I can wear down any superpowered individual. Xiao Ran walked over, reached out, and pressed his hand. Instantly, a warm current flowed into him. Nice. However, a strong desire also began to well up inside him, and his eyes quickly turned red. This, fellow student, you've killed this heinous villain. You've made a great contribution to the school and to society. Huang Lingwen, as if a completely different person, immediately said to Xiao Ran, looking all righteous and awe-inspiring. Xiao Ran ignored him and said to Yun Wantong, should I kill him, or do you want to do it yourself? Yun Wantong's delicate body couldn't help but tremble. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had already decided to draw a clear line with Huang Lingwen and treat him as a stranger from now on. But killing was another matter entirely. She was a teacher dedicated to educating people and always law-abiding. To ask her to kill someone, or even to condone killing, at least for now, she couldn't accept it. Fellow student, please don't talk non. Huang Lingwen hurriedly tried to argue, but a bullet had already been fired. Thwack! It lodged in his forehead. He collapsed with a thud, his eyes wide and round, as if he couldn't die in peace. Xiao Ran acted as if nothing had happened. He'd killed so many people that it was hard for such things to faze him anymore. Yun Wantong, however, let out a scream. 2 people had now died in front of her. Song Hui was one thing. He was a brute. But Huang Lingwen could only be described as a pathetic wretch, and now he too lay dead before her. This was a huge shock to her. Xiao Ran walked over, looking down at the stunning female teacher. He was 178 centimeters tall, and Yunwan Tong was about 169 centimeters, so he could indeed look down on her. "I saved you. How are you going to repay me?" he asked with a smile, desire stirring within him. Yunwan Tong gave a sarcastic smile. "What makes you any different from Song Hui? He wanted to toy with me, and you're no exception." She'd seen through him. Men, they were all just animals driven by lust, thinking with their lower bodies. "There's a difference," Xiao Ran said seriously. "Song Hui used force. I'm different. I only make deals." He waved his hand, and a hot pot stove appeared on the table, already bubbling, the flame burning bright red. He waved his hand again, and platters of food for hot pot were laid out. Yunwan Tong, utterly astonished, couldn't help but gulp, her mouth watering. "You know now, there are people with special abilities in this world," Xiao Ran said calmly. "Song Hui is one, and so am I. You can probably guess what my ability is, and I can tell you I have a lot of supplies. A lot. Enough for you to feast like a king for several lifetimes. Besides, I also have a villa with electricity, heating, and you can even take hot showers. If you come with me, you can enjoy all of this. The decision is yours." After saying this, Xiao Ran stored the hot pot stove and the ingredients into his dimensional space. His lust was burning hotter and hotter. He couldn't wait for Yu Nuantong to finish eating. So, if she agreed, they would start immediately. If she didn't, too bad. He'd have to silence her. "I saved your life, so it's only fair if I take it, right? Lust? He could find someone else. A few packs of instant noodles would do the trick." Yu Nuantong hesitated for a moment, glanced at Huang Lingqing's corpse, and finally nodded. Xiao Ran wasn't going to let her off that easily. Yu Nuantong shot him an angry, embarrassed glare. "I said yes." Only then did Xiao Ran break into a smile. "Let's go." He led Yu Nuantong downstairs. They didn't encounter anyone on the way, which was good. It saved him the trouble of silencing more people. Firstly, it would waste bullets, and secondly, he wasn't a psychopathic killer who got a thrill from murder. Unless absolutely necessary. He truly didn't want to kill. Or so Xiao Ran said. With a thought, the G-Wagon instantly materialized out of thin air. Even though Yu Nuantong already knew Xiao Ran possessed such an ability, she was still stunned, her jaw dropping at the sight of such a monstrous vehicle appearing before her. This was too much. "After you," Xiao Ran said, opening the car door. Yu Nuantong got in, and immediately, a strong wave of warmth washed over her, making her hum in comfort. Such a pleasant sound. Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. He started the car and drove directly to the sports field. It was empty. Anyone approaching would be visible from afar. Very safe. An hour later, Xiao Ran had calmed down. This was the downside of absorbing abilities. It fiercely aroused his desires. But compared to the power-up, this side effect was, of course, a small price to pay. The maximum size of his spatial gate had increased to 20 by 20 meters. What did this mean? Theoretically, he could store an entire villa, provided the foundation was dug out, because the dimensional space could only take in independent objects. As long as it was an independent object and didn't exceed the gate's dimensions, anything could be instantly stored. And the maximum casting distance? Still 4 meters. It seemed it couldn't be increased further. His spatial perception, however, now extended to 8 meters. No new abilities? Xiao Ran wondered. Did new abilities only emerge in moments of crisis? Previously, during the intense battle with the mutated husky, he had felt immense pressure, the threat of death, and suddenly awakened his spatial perception. So, was he lacking that kind of pressure now? Or had he not absorbed enough abilities? Or perhaps, was his limit just 2 abilities? After pondering for a moment, his gaze fell upon Yu Nuantong, and a smile involuntarily touched his lips. With such a beauty lying beside him, he was actually still thinking about abilities. How inappropriate. Xiao Ran smirked. "I didn't expect you to still be a virgin." Yu Nuantong sighed. "My parents are very traditional, and so am I." It was something that had to wait until after marriage, but after guarding it for so long, she hadn't been able to keep it. The crucial thing was, she only knew Xiao Ran's name. All other information was missing. Morality, dignity, none of it was more important than staying alive. As a teacher, she felt deeply ashamed. Shouldn't she have valued her principles more than her life? "I'll take you home," Xiao Ran said. He felt completely relaxed now. He started the car and drove off campus. Not long after he left, a man with a crew cut, carrying a duffel bag, walked into the school. A black short sword hung at his waist. He wasn't tall, only about 170 centimeters, but his eyes were incredibly sharp, as if they could pierce through a person's soul. He stopped, picked up a piece of ice from the ground, and crunched it in his mouth before swallowing. The crew-cut man strode onto campus. The path was slippery, but he walked with uncanny stability. Though his feet occasionally slipped, he maintained his balance with subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in his footing. To watch him was both amazing and somewhat unbelievable. Similar to Xiao Ran's route, he first entered the East cafeteria and saw the bodies of Yang Wenqi and his group. He frowned and retreated. However, he didn't go to the West cafeteria next, but instead entered an academic building. After searching around, he came out and continued onward. Before long, he found 5 students in a classroom. The same 5 Xiao Ran had questioned earlier, still huddled around a fire for warmth. Seeing the crew-cut man approach, the 5 were slightly surprised. He clearly wasn't a student or teacher from the school. So how had he braved the severe cold and slippery paths to get here? The crew-cut man, however, put down the bag he was carrying and said, "I have some questions. Answer me honestly, and what's in here is yours." The 5 craned their necks to look and saw the bag was filled with bread, instant noodles, and a few bottles of fresh water. Their spirits lifted, and they quickly said, "Ask away, ask away." More than 10 minutes later, the crew-cut man nodded, a satisfied look on his face. He suddenly drew a knife and rushed at the 5 students. Swish, swish, swish. The short blade flashed, and all 5 students had their throats slit almost simultaneously, blood gushing like fountains. Song Hui, his eyes gleamed. "Your ability is mine now," he muttered. Unfortunately, before Xiao Ran could reach the residential complex, a thick fog began to roll in, forcing him to stop the car. "Time to eat," Xiao Ran said to Yunuantong. "Teacher, you must surely think he was a liar now, that he'd used her without fulfilling his promise." However, as she watched Xiao Ran recline the seats, set up 3 simple bed desks, and arrange them together to form a large table, then place plate after plate and dish after dish of delicious food upon it, she finally realized she had misunderstood him. He hadn't intended to trick her for sex. He was just a bit too eager. The two began to eat. Xiao Ran's meals were the same before and after the apocalypse. He'd never truly experienced hunger. But Yunuantong was different. She had survived in an academic building for over 20 days, subsisting daily on small snacks. Not only was she malnourished, but her mouth also tasted bland as anything. She had once fantasized that if she could just have a bowl of braised pork belly again, she would be willing to give anything. Now, her wish hadn't just come true. It had far exceeded her expectations. Braised pork belly, chicken soup, stir-fried vegetables, and even a steamed Boston lobster. Xiao Ran ate only a few bites, just enough to fill his stomach, but Yunuantong devoured the food ravenously, without a care for her image. After she finished eating, Xiao Ran made her drink another bowl of chicken soup. "You've just become a woman. Chicken soup is nourishing," Xiao Ran said with a smile. "This has ginseng in it, good for replenishing qi and blood." Yunuantong immediately blushed crimson. After Yunuantong finished the chicken soup, Xiao Ran had wanted her to drink some milk too. The woman was truly malnourished. For the past 20-odd days since the cataclysm, she had merely survived, but her quality of life had been abysmal. But her stomach was already about to burst. How could she possibly eat any more? The night passed. In the early morning, after Xiao Ran and Yunuantong had breakfast, they continued their drive back to the campus. This time, the journey was smooth, and they arrived successfully half an hour later. After parking the car in the garage, Xiao Ran told Yunuantong to get out. Yunuantong was shocked. "You letting me go out dressed like this?" This was an autumn outfit. In the current weather, even ordinary winter clothes weren't enough to prevent freezing to death, let alone autumn wear. Xiao Ran laughed heartily, wrapped an arm around Yunuantong's neck, and kissed her. "My dear teacher, how could I bear to let you freeze? Get out of the car. Trust me." Since he'd said that, Yunuantong tentatively opened the car door. Huh? She was astonished to find that it wasn't a blast of cold air rushing in from outside, but a warm current. Heavens! She fully opened the door and stepped out. It was warm, unbelievably warm. "Xiao Ran," a chorus of assorted voices called out. 8 distinctively beautiful women also appeared in the garage. Oh, and a dog, but that could be ignored. Yunuantong was rather stunned. Among the 8 women, only 2 were slightly less striking in appearance, but the other 6 possessed beauty comparable to her own. One, in particular, was not only younger, but also a shade more beautiful than her. Wait, 2 of the women looked quite familiar. "Teacher Yu," Zhonglei, Su Xinran and Zhao Yansu exclaimed in unison. Yu Nuantong also remembered. Su Xinran. Zhao Yansu. She didn't recognize Zhong Lei. After speaking, her face immediately flushed bright red. She naturally knew these two campus belles from school. Not only were they beautiful, but their academic performance was also outstanding, winning first-class scholarships every year. They were what you'd call famous beyond their circle. Just as she herself had been back in her day, was there any student or teacher at school who didn't know of her, the campus beauty? But what did their presence here signify? They too were Xiao Ran's women. How could teacher you bear this? Zhao Yansu sauntered over, swaying her hips with an irresistible allure, and giggled. Xiao Ran, you really have good taste. Ms. Yu is a renowned beauty in our school. She was the campus belle as a student, and after becoming a teacher, she's been the subject of countless students' fantasies. They all dream of spending intimate nights with Ms. Yu. This green tea, always knowing how to stir things up, yet she made it sound like praise or envy for Yu Nuantong. Yu Nuantong's face paled. That's right, as a teacher, was she actually fighting with a student over a man? How could she do such a thing? But if she refused Xiao Ran's patronage now and ran out on her own, wouldn't she freeze to death in minutes? Xiao Ran didn't stop Zhao Yansu. He didn't need his household to be a picture of perfect harmony, or worse, a stagnant pond. With a green tea like Zhao Yansu around, poking at one person today and needling another tomorrow, things would certainly liven up. Besides, when women grew jealous and vied for his attention, they would only try harder to please him. Little green tea, you truly know what I like. Xiao Ran glanced at Zhao Yansu, giving her a subtle nod of approval. Zhao Yansu immediately returned a flirtatious wink, acknowledging his unspoken praise. All right, let's head back inside, he said with a wave of his hand, directing all 9 women into the living room. Inside, the fireplace blazed fiercely, yet the warmth was evenly distributed throughout every corner of the villa. It wasn't as if the living room was the warmest spot just because the fireplace was located there. Yu Nuantong gazed at the brightly lit lamps, the television playing, and the currents of warm air circulating. Such comforts were beyond anything she could have imagined before. Relax, act naturally. We're all family here, Xiao Ran said with a smile. But his words, far from easing Yu Nuantong's mind, seemed to serve as a stark reminder. Every woman here belonged to Xiao Ran. From now on, she would have to compete with them for his favor. How mortifying. You too, stop teasing her. Han Yun intervened, gently leading Yu Nuantong aside. Xiao Ran scanned the 9 women, thinking to himself that in a couple of days, he'd have them wear uniforms corresponding to their professions. There was a female teacher, a policewoman, a female student. Right, what did Han Yun do? A regular office lady? And Su Qingmei. Should he have her wear a prison uniform? That might not be a bad idea. As Xiao Ran was lost in his thoughts, Su Qingmei spoke up. The battle in the residential complex has concluded, ending with the near annihilation of Building 4. However, the ringleaders, like Lu Yang and Sun Wentao, are still at large. Their whereabouts are unknown. Finished in just one day, Xiao Ran nodded. The fall of Building 4 wasn't surprising. After all, that group occupied only one building, while the entire complex had 25. Building 4 was vastly outnumbered. What does primitive warfare boil down to? Numbers, of course. But Lu Yang and his cronies actually managed to escape? Xiao Ran chuckled. Those men were already vicious. Now that they had scattered and gone into hiding, it would actually be easier for them to make their moves. If they weren't found and eliminated quickly, no building's residents could expect peace. But what the hell did that have to do with him? The complex representatives came over last night, Su Qingmei continued. They reported 144 kills from Building 4 and want to redeem them for food and water from you. Xiao Ran nodded. You're quite capable. You could be my secretary from now on. Su Qingmei rolled her eyes at him. The secretary handles the work when there's work, and when there's no work, you handle the secretary. Is that it? That line is so tired. Xiao Ran roared with laughter. He opened the window, picked up a megaphone, and announced, Dear neighbors, I'm back. Come and collect your rewards. He went to the basement, opened the iron door, and took out a supply of frozen food. The amount far exceeded what he'd previously promised, so it served as an extra bonus. Then, he returned to the villa. It was freezing outside. Before long, more than 30 people arrived. Upon seeing the supplies placed in the passage, they hesitated, apparently afraid Xiao Ran might suddenly spray poison if they entered. But after a moment's deliberation, they went in and began to carry the goods away. By the time all the supplies were gone, no poison had been sprayed. They sighed in collective relief, forced to admit that Xiao Ran was indeed a man of his word. He had never reneged on a bounty. His word had become gold. Although it was all frozen food, everyone was overjoyed. Finally, we have something to eat. This must be supplies Xiao Ran found when he went out. It's all because he has that car. If only we could get our hands on that car. Shall watch your words. We'll talk when we get back. These individuals, representatives from about 20 different buildings, carried the supplies back. The goods were divided, as previously agreed, with people waiting at each building to receive their share. They immediately started fires to prepare the food. However, the group of over 30 people didn't return to their buildings right away. Instead, they gathered to discuss. We can't go on relying on someone else to feed us like this. That's right. It's not just about the humiliation. It's like having a sword hanging over our necks. If Xiao Ran demanded one of our lives one day, who would hesitate? We'd be thrown out immediately. We must solve this problem quickly. People fall into habits. Once we get used to Xiao Ran calling the shots, we'll be completely at his mercy. The key is that car. How can we get our hands on it? They talked back and forth, but they couldn't see a way around Xiao Ran and his villa. To get the car, they had to breach the villa. They had to kill Xiao Ran. Suddenly, someone spoke up. I have a cousin who worked for a construction crew. Before the cataclysm, they were about to use explosives to demolish a bridge for reconstruction. He can definitely get his hands on some explosives. Everyone's eyes lit up. Bomb the villa. It seemed a bit of a waste, as they all knew now that the villa had heating and even electricity. Aren't you afraid of damaging the car? It's fine. We just need to blast a corner, create an entrance. Xiao Ran only managed to act so fiercely before either by spraying poison with that toy gun or by ramming people with his modified car. Deep down, isn't he just an ordinary person like us? He doesn't have 3 heads and 6 arms. So what's there to be afraid of? Everyone nodded in agreement. Actually, couldn't we try a simpler method first? Someone else suggested with a laugh. We could lure him out under the pretext of a meeting. There are over 1,000 people in this complex. We could crush him to death in the crowd. But what if he doesn't agree? The previous speaker chuckled. If he doesn't agree, we don't lose anything, do we? That's true. All right then, let's try to lure him out for a meeting first. If he refuses, then we'll figure out how to get the explosives. Xiao Ran had no idea the people in the complex were already planning to team up against him. Even if he did, he wouldn't have cared. Was the villa upgraded for nothing? It's no exaggeration to say that unless it was hit directly by a missile, ordinary weapons truly couldn't breach the villa's defenses. Of course, before the cataclysm, there were other methods, like using fire. Wouldn't the villa turn into an oven, roasting everything inside, even charring it? But with the current low temperatures, how many people could even go outside and stay there long enough? Besides, to start a fire, you'd need firewood or a lot of gasoline, right? Let's not even talk about whether they had any. Even if they did, they'd have to set it up. And with the weather so extremely cold now, you'd have to ensure the fire was big enough. Otherwise, the heat it generated would dissipate faster than it was produced. What good would that do? Taking a huge step back, even if the villa did turn into an oven, Xiao Ran had plenty of ice in his dimensional space, which could be used to cool it down. Drainage? Either out through the basement or into his dimensional space. Both were easy. Xiao Ran had spent a fortune upgrading the villa. How could he not have considered these factors? Of course, if someone was incredibly powerful and could call in a missile strike, the villa definitely wouldn't withstand it. But if Xiao Ran knew roughly when a missile was coming, he could totally stand on the villa roof, open his dimensional gate, and just absorb the missile. His portal was 20 by 20 meters now. Which missile has a diameter larger than that? Xiao Ran had already absorbed 3 abilities. Having been out every day recently, he planned to stay home for the next couple of days and enjoy the tenderness and charm of the women. This was the fortune he had fought for with his own hands. He walked over and entered Han Yun's room. It was on the ground floor. This woman's proportions were too perfect. In this regard, only Zhao Yansu among all the women could compare. Oh, he hadn't seen Su Xinran's figure yet. He wondered about Lu Mei. This top-tier beauty lived up to her name, beautiful and charming, with an even hotter body. Although he hadn't personally measured it, he was absolutely sure her figure was also top-tier. And Lu Susu, while not top-tier in looks, had a fantastic body too. Xiao Ran felt a bit wistful. There were more and more beauties in the villa lately, and he'd almost forgotten about Lu Mei and Lu Susu. Indeed, new loves make one forget the old. No, I like the new, but I don't dislike the old. I want them all. Just then, his phone chimed with a notification. He opened it to see someone had arrived at the basement door and was knocking. Too lazy to go down, he connected to the speaker via his phone and asked, "What is it?" It was a man about 50 years old. Looking at the monitor, he said, the complex has decided to hold a collective meeting to choose a leader to guide us on what to do next. Xiao Ran, you're one of the candidates, and the one we have the highest hopes for. We hope you can participate. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, a cold smirk playing on his lips. All right, what time? Probably after lunch, the man said. Most electronic devices were out of power now, and how many people still own traditional watches? So, time could only be estimated. Got it, Xiao Ran said, then tossed his phone aside. You're going? Han Yin tensed. Why, you think I shouldn't? Xiao Ran had already made up his mind, but he asked deliberately. Han Yin nodded. Don't let all that talk about being a leader go to your head. It's most likely a trap to lure you out and kill you. Xiao Ran burst out laughing and pulled her into his arms. Don't worry, the only one who makes my head spin is you. Han Yin understood instantly. Sure. She lightly thumped his chest, her face blushing crimson, looking enchantingly beautiful. Xiao Ran chuckled. Relax, with vixens like you all at home. How could I bear to die? If they want to rob and kill me, I'll make them pay in blood. Besides, I'm getting a bit tired of playing with them anyway. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. That was killing intent. His principle was very simple. If you don't mess with me, you live your life, I live mine. But if you do mess with me, then sorry, you can all go to hell. Han Yin rested on his chest, nodding gently. You must be careful. I know you have powerful abilities, but you're still flesh and blood. As they say, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against a hidden arrow. Arrogance sows the seeds of failure, and in this environment, failure could mean death. Okay, I know. By the way, what did you do before? Xiao Ran asked curiously. You're not a teacher too, are you? You talk in such well-reasoned sets. I'm a teacher, Han Yin said. So it was true. Damn, he'd been too careless and hadn't even asked before. Otherwise, he could have started playing the forbidden student-teacher game long ago. It was almost 11 o'clock. After watching a bit more TV, Xiao Ran had everyone eat lunch together. The lunch was extremely lavish. Xiao Ran wasn't afraid of waste, bringing out over 20 dishes, along with beer, baijiu, champagne, and more, so everyone could choose their favorite food and drinks. After they finished eating, he checked the time, 11:30. Still early. He chatted with the women, played some small games, and then checked the time again. It was almost 12:30. All right, time to go. Xiao Ran first checked the surveillance monitors to ensure it was safe before heading out. Though it was unlikely anyone would be lying in ambush in such cold weather, it was always better to be cautious. Prudence was the foremost secret to survival. A blast of cold air hit him, and Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel invigorated, pushing all thoughts of the bevy of beauties he'd left behind to the back of his mind. To be thinking about women at a time like this was truly courting death. Exiting the passage, he saw a light in the distance. It was a firelight. Willing to splurge, huh? Even build a bonfire, he mused. Then again, it's freezing out here. Who could stand it for long? Xiao Ran didn't use a flashlight. As long as he occasionally activated his spatial awareness, how could there be any blind spots within an 8-meter radius around him? Front, back, left, or right? It was clearer than daylight. So ambush him? Impossible. He approached stealthily, without making a sound. Why isn't Xiao Ran here yet? Yeah, it's already 12:30. Laoli, is Xiao Ran just stringing you along? Laoli, the man who had delivered the message earlier, frowned and shook his head. He shouldn't be. He promised earnestly that he would definitely come. Exactly. What reason would he have not to come? We even said we'd make him our leader, but he doesn't know that. Shh. Someone immediately hushed him, and everyone else fell silent. Don't speak carelessly, one person said in a low, grave voice. Today, the outcome of our discussion will decide the fate of the entire residential complex. Yes, everyone nodded, and so, a chill fell over the group, and they resumed waiting for Xiao Ran to appear. Xiao Ran moved through the darkness as if equipped with built-in infrared scanning, every detail imprinted in his mind. He knew exactly how many people were in this group and where each of them was hiding. Hit. A cold smirk touched his lips. Since he had already sized up the situation, it was time to let the game begin. He stopped tiptoeing and strode forward boldly. Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran's here. People nearby caught sight of him in the faint firelight and cried out in surprise. Xiao Ran had arrived. Those blocking his path quickly parted, allowing Xiao Ran to advance smoothly, or, one might say, to walk willingly into their encirclement. Xiao Ran, you're finally here, a man said with a wide smile. Xiao Ran recognized him. Liang Mingfang from the 15th floor, in his 30s, with a somewhat portly build. It seemed he was the representative chosen by the group. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. I'm here. So, let's get this meeting started. Xiao Ran, we can make you our leader. Whatever you say, we'll do it. But with power comes responsibility. The livelihood of everyone here will fall on your shoulders, Liang Mingfang said. Then, turning to the crowd, he declared, Everyone, let's cheer. From now on, we'll have someone to rely on. Chief Xiao. Hail, Chief Xiao. The crowd roared, their voices loud, regardless of whether their enthusiasm was genuine or feigned. Xiao Ran remained non-committal, merely looking at Liang Mingfang with an unreadable smile. You call me chief, and I'm supposed to provide for all of you? Heh, is there really such a sweet deal in this world? If someone called me dad, should I then hand over all my family fortune to him? Liang Mingfang's expression stiffened. The others didn't look pleased either, glaring daggers at Xiao Ran. His words were a clear slap in their faces. Old Liang, the guy's already here. Why bother with this charade anymore? Someone shouted. Kill him. Once he's dead, everything will be ours. Get him. The crowd clamored. Xiao Ran had already walked into their trap. Why continue with the pretense? No point wasting any more time. Liang Mingfang nodded as well. Xiao Ran was currently unarmed and completely surrounded. So, did he have any way to turn the tables? No, not a sliver of a chance. Xiao Ran. Oh, Xiao Ran. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Liang Mingfang shook his head. You should have listened to us from the beginning. It would have been better for everyone, you included, and you wouldn't have had to lose your life over this. So, you see, a person must grasp the bigger picture. Liang Mingfang's voice dropped. Go, take him down. The charade was over. The knives were out. The group pulled out their hidden weapons, their eyes fixed on Xiao Ran with murderous intent. Kill this guy. Once Xiao Ran was dead, everything he owned, that villa, those supplies, and Hanya and that utterly seductive vixen, would belong to them. After taking the villa, every man would have his turn with her. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. All right then, this residential complex is due for a cleanup. Just then, the crowd surged forward. From all directions. Honestly, even if Xiao Ran had 3 heads and 6 arms, what good would it do? A single slash or club strike from each person would be enough to beat Xiao Ran to a pulp. With a mere thought from Xiao Ran, 3 cars silently materialized around him, forming a protective barrier, leaving only one side open. But this open side was even more lethal, for Xiao Ran had opened a spatial gate there. Oof! Shit! Thump! 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 The attackers rushed forward. Who could have expected cars to appear out of thin air? Instantly, those at the front slammed into the cars. Those behind couldn't stop in time and piled into them, a chaotic crush of bodies. The ones further back were relatively fine, but those in the front caught in the squeeze suffered broken bones. So many days after the cataclysm, how many people had actually seen sunlight? Who had managed to gain any calcium? So, even if they hadn't developed osteoporosis yet, it was certain that their bone resilience had begun to deteriorate, making them break more easily. Thus, under such intense pressure, bones naturally snapped. What's going on? Why did cars suddenly appear? What in the devil is happening? Even though this was a garage, and there were indeed cars everywhere, how could they suddenly teleport here? If this wasn't something supernatural, what was? The unknown bred intense terror, and everyone trembled uncontrollably. What was even more horrifying? On the one side, not blocked by cars, people surged forward like a tide, only to vanish bizarrely and abruptly. There was no stopping them. It wasn't until over 100 people had suddenly disappeared that those in that path finally ground to a halt. Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran. Liang Mingfang pointed a trembling finger at him. You, this was your doing, wasn't it? Naturally, Xiao Ran chuckled. Now that you all know my secret, it's time for you to depart. Oh, right, he said, as if a thought had just struck him. Thank you all for playing with me these past days. Entertainment has been scarce since the cataclysm, and you've provided me with no small amount of amusement. I truly should thank you for that. However, the hail has stopped now, and the fog has lifted. I can go out. So, I no longer require your entertainment. You all, farewell. Xiao Ran went on a killing spree. People in the residential complex died in droves. Bullets flew everywhere. With such a dense crowd, aiming was unnecessary. As long as he didn't shoot upwards or at the ground, every shot was guaranteed to hit. Xiao Ran continued his pursuit. With his superhuman speed and stamina, once he chased someone to within 8 meters, he could open a space gate right in front of them. Ordinary people had no sense of impending danger and would naturally stumble right in. It was a foregone conclusion. Screams rose and fell ceaselessly. Many were hit by bullets, but not fatally, so they naturally cried out in pain, making the entire scene resemble a slaughterhouse even more. The survivors instantly lost all will to resist. Could they escape? Absolutely not. So one by one, they fell to their knees, wailing and begging Xiao Ran for mercy. Boss Xiao, Master Xiao, spare me. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything you say. I'm willing to be your plaything. You can do whatever you want with me. In the face of death, there weren't many fearless warriors. There were some, but not many, and they were all dead. Xiao Ran stopped, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. A faint smile touched his lips. You want me to spare you? Fine. I have a task for you. Within 3 days, find and eliminate all the fugitives from Building 4, including Lu Yang and Sun Wentao. If I don't see their corpses in 3 days, then I'll slaughter all of you. Conversely, if you bring me their bodies, I can even reward you with some food. I always keep my word. You could trust me, right? Who would dare not to believe him? With mournful faces, everyone thought, why did we ever provoke Xiao Ran? Was he even human? He could materialize cars out of thin air, make people disappear in an instant, and fire bullets without a gun. How could any normal human do that? And they had actually tried to contend with such a monster, even attempting to snatch things from him? They must have had a death wish. Everyone nodded hastily. All they wanted now was to survive. Nothing else mattered. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Go. Even though these people now knew a tiny bit of a secret, it didn't matter. None of them could escape this residential complex. Lu Yang and his group were now like rats. Everyone wanted to exterminate cornered beasts, and they were bound to clash violently with these survivors. By the time Lu Yang and his men were eliminated, perhaps only 100 or so people would be left in the entire complex. Wasn't that great? It would save him a lot of bullets. Sometimes, getting others to do your dirty work was a good option, and he could even enjoy the show. Why not? The survivors departed, leaving behind a large group of wounded, still screaming in agony on the ground. Please, save me. Someone grabbed Xiao Ran's pant leg. It was actually a rather attractive young married woman. If you save me, I'll be your slave. Do anything you ask, she pleaded, looking up at Xiao Ran with a hopeful expression. Xiao Ran coldly pulled his leg free and walked away. These people had wanted to kill him and take everything he had. If he could still muster any sympathy for them, he might as well find a rope, hang himself, and hand over his villa and all the women inside. What an idiot he would be. They had brought this upon themselves. He entered the passage, opened the door, and closed it behind him, shutting out all the screams and groans. Seeing Xiao Ran return safely, all the women breathed a collective sigh of relief. Their fates were now inextricably bound to his. If anything had happened to Xiao Ran, they would either starve, die of thirst, or freeze to death in the villa, or they would become playthings for all the men in the complex. The latter fate would be far more tragic than death. Thankfully, Xiao Ran had returned safe and sound. In truth, they had suspected Xiao Ran would win, as he wasn't an ordinary person but possessed superpowers. However, since their own lives were at stake, they had been extremely worried. Now, finally, their worries were gone. Xiao Ran smiled. It's all right now. Everyone, go on with what you were doing. In the afternoon, they watched some shows and played cards. After dinner, Xiao Ran took the 9 women and leopard out of the villa. What for? To go out and have fun? No way. Xiao Ran was preparing to replenish his firepower and diversify his methods for dealing with enemies. They arrived at Building 22 in the complex. The complex had villas, mid-rise buildings, and high-rises. Buildings 22, 23, 24, and 25 are the high-rises, each 34 stories tall. Xiao Ran led the women to the top of the building. With his excellent physique, climbing 34 floors in one go was no problem for him. But the women were different. They were ordinary people. So, they stopped to rest when they reached the 20th floor before continuing. Arriving at the top floor, they went up to the rooftop. The rooftop door was locked, but Xiao Ran kicked it open with one blow. On the rooftop, Xiao Ran began his preparations. A generator and a conveyor belt. Once ready, he retrieved a pile of rebar from his subdimension and placed it on the conveyor belt. Now, if the conveyor belt was activated, the steel bars would rain down from the sky. Xiao Ran would only need to open a space gate below to catch them. Imagine the terrifying, destructive power of rebar falling from 34 stories. After all, even an egg dropped from such a height could kill a person. So what about rebar? Bullets were somewhat ineffective against supers, like the mutated husky, because even if they hit, the stopping power wasn't enough. But what about shooting them with rebar? Not only would the destructive force be greatly increased, but it could also create effective interference, trapping the target. It wasn't just rebar. Xiao Ran also planned to collect some stones. Rebar was sharp, with excellent single-target lethality. Stones were blunt and heavy, perfect for demolition, like if he encountered a vault door. Xiao Ran could continuously bombard it with boulders, retrieve them, and bombard it again. He didn't believe any door could withstand that. This was different from bombs. He could effectively control the area of destruction. The key was that these materials were incredibly common and reusable. Simply perfect. How could his opponents ever know whether Xiao Ran's next shot would be a bullet, a steel bar, or even a tank? Of course, Xiao Ran couldn't yet drop a tank from the rooftop. Only he could launch it, but who would catch it below? If he were below to catch it, how could the conveyor belt possibly support the weight of tank? Once Xiao Ran was ready, he went downstairs. He had prepared thoroughly. Braziers were placed both upstairs and downstairs, and there was even a simple windproof shelter, much like a COVID testing booth. So, all the women had to do was wait for Xiao Ran's signal, and then flip the switch for the conveyor belt. "Ready," Xiao Ran said over the walkie-talkie. 3, 2, 1, go, Han Yun announced. A few seconds later, hundreds of rebars rained down from above. However, Xiao Ran didn't catch a single one. He'd chosen the wrong spot. No matter, they had figured out the drop zone. Xiao Ran moved the shelter to a new position and went back up to the rooftop. After arranging the rebars, he returned downstairs, got into position, and gave the signal via walkie-talkie. A few seconds later, another 100 rebars fell. This time, Xiao Ran collected all of them into his pocket dimension. Again, after collecting a large quantity of rebar, Xiao Ran switched to rocks, some the size of human heads, others even heavier. The main concern was whether the conveyor belt could handle the weight. If the conveyor belt could take it, Xiao Ran would have loved to drop that tank too. A tank weighing so many tons, dropped from the 34th floor. The kinetic energy generated would be terrifying. Sigh. If only I could teleport, Xiao Ran said with regret. If he could teleport, he could easily throw and catch them himself. The 10 of them worked for most of the night. Xiao Ran collected tens of thousands of rebars, each carrying immense kinetic energy and a similar number of rocks. Job done. Xiao Ran didn't continue. These weapons would be enough for the time being. If he faced that mutated husky now, Xiao Ran was confident he could take it down within 10 seconds. Of course, that was assuming they were indoors, where the husky couldn't use its speed advantage. If they fought on open plains, the mutated husky could just run, and neither rebar nor rocks could catch it. Only bullets would be fast enough. If I drop them from a mountaintop thousands of meters high, the terminal velocity should be sufficient, right? Xiao Ran chuckled, dismissing the impractical thought. Might as well try to get some missiles. The 10 of them returned home. As the warmth enveloped them, they all let out contented sighs. One truly appreciated such comforts only after experiencing hardship. Precisely because of this, the 9 women were naturally more resigned to their fate. Even if they had to share one man, they wouldn't want to leave, not with heating like this. Besides, it wasn't just heating. There was also hot water for showers and endless delicious food. They couldn't leave. They absolutely couldn't. Later that night, everyone washed up and went to bed. No one had any energy left. Even Xiao Ran was quite tired. He'd lost count of how many times he'd run up and down. Despite his exceptional stamina, even he couldn't withstand such exertion. He woke up past 10 a.m. Getting up, he saw that among the 9 women, only Su Qingmei was awake. People who've done hard time really are different. Xiao Ran took out some tang yuan from his storage space for her to cook, then went to wake the others. Couldn't wake them? A few spanks on the bottom. And how could they not wake up? By the time the tang yuan were cooked, all the women were up, washed, and ready for breakfast. However, after breakfast, Xiao Ran took some fresh meat and vegetables from his space and had them prepare lunch and dinner. They couldn't just eat ready-made meals every day. Was he supposed to raise them like princesses? They had to do their share. In this house, he was the only one who could do whatever he pleased. At noon, the 9 women worked together to prepare 10 dishes and a soup, perfectly filling a round table. Xiao Ran tasted it. Not bad. He couldn't help but smile and said, "I didn't realize you all were so skilled in the kitchen." All the women looked at Wong Lulu. "We just helped out. Lulu was the real chef," they said. Xiao Ran was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected this mistress of his to have such excellent cooking skills. Was she trying to capture a man's heart by first capturing his stomach? Xiao Ran nodded. From now on, when it comes to the kitchen, Lulu is in charge. She'll assign all your tasks. None of the women objected. Who could argue when Wong Lulu's cooking was genuinely that good? So, she was the head chef, and the others were her assistants. Xiao Ran decided to rest for 3 days. Firstly, after several consecutive days of activity, he needed a break. Secondly, He wanted to see if the people in the residential complex could root out Lu Yang and his group. However, that afternoon, the bodies of Sun Wintao and several other leaders for Building 4 were brought over. Taking stock, the only one still hiding in the complex was Lu Yang. Just one person, and not even an ability user. What kind of trouble could he stir up? Although Xiao Ran never underestimated anyone, there was no need to be overly humble and exaggerate the threat of an ordinary opponent. Unfortunately, despite having absorbed 3 different powers, he hadn't awakened any new abilities. Did he really need the pressure of a life-or-death crisis? The day passed. Xiao Ran, fully rested, entered Su Xinran's room. Su Qingmei was there too. Xiao Ran was very pleased. Though the sisters were about 70% alike in appearance, their demeanors were completely different. One was like fire, the other like ice, yet they were biological sisters. Curious, he asked the 2 women about their past case. Su Xinran found it difficult to speak, so Su Qingmei explained, "Back then, my sister was in her 2nd year of high school. A tutor from her cram school had ill intentions towards her. He lured Xinran to a hotel, claiming he needed to give her extra lessons. That silly girl was so naive, she actually went. As a result, she drank the water that beast gave her and passed out immediately. Fortunately, she had at least been a bit cautious and sent me a message beforehand. I rushed over immediately, pretended to be a hotel attendant, and knocked on the door. I saw someone about to assault Xinran, so I fought with him. In the struggle, I accidentally stabbed him to death." Xiao Ran was taken aback. "Wasn't the tutor?" "No." Su Qingmei shook her head. "That tutor was just a lackey. He worked for the vice president of the Qinghong group, using the cram school to find pretty female students for him to abuse." She added, "That scoundrel's name was Yu Wenjie. His old man is the chairman of Qinghong group. Relying on his dirty money, he'd throw cash around to settle things privately after each assault. If the victim didn't agree, he'd threaten to release videos of the assault. So, all the previous victims chose to settle. I acted in excessive self-defense. At most, I should have been sentenced to 3 to 5 years. But the other side fabricated a lot of false evidence against me, claiming Yu Wenjie was drunk, mentally unclear, and didn't have enough strength to harm anyone. As a result, I was given a maximum sentence. In prison, Yu Wenjie's father, Yu Jiaqing, even came to see me personally. He threatened to go after Xinran, to have her conceive that old bastard's vile offspring. So I told Xinran to stay in school at all times and never go out, to give that old lecher no chance. That's why Xinran would only leave school to visit me, and she'd be on a video call with her classmates the entire time, just to prevent that old beast from trying anything." Xiao Ran grimaced. "What about that cram school tutor?" "Him," Su Xinran interjected. "He was one of those who perjured himself, and he even slandered me, claiming I was a prostitute, all to clear Yu Wenjie's name. Later, I heard he was fired from his original tutoring center, but Yu Jiaqing paid to set up a new one for him." Xiao Ran was taken aback. Could Yu Jiaqing also have been involved in assaulting female students? Otherwise, with his son dead, why would he still keep this man around? He even had him doing the same kind of work. So, to say Yu Jiaqing wasn't involved? Only a fool would believe that. Perhaps before, the father and son took turns, or maybe even did it together. It was just that on Su Xinran's occasion, only Yu Wenjie happened to be involved. Although Xiao Ran despised these 2 scumbags, to say he'd go out of his way to hunt them down in some corner of Su City and eliminate them, that was of course impossible. His feelings for the Su Qingmei sisters hadn't reached that depth, and they probably never would. In this life, he had sealed off his emotions. With women, it was purely for pleasure, at most a bit of favor. Love? What a joke. After being betrayed by his ex-wife's family and discovering that the son he'd raised wasn't his biological child, his heart had closed off. It wouldn't open for any woman again, no matter how beautiful. Take Lu Mei, for example. She was top tier, wasn't she? But Xiao Ran never even thought of pursuing her. Instead, he planned to use his supplies after the apocalypse to make her submit. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. She was actually poached by her close friends. Still, there was a chance. Maybe. He could have both of them. Lu Mei was a smart woman. After a few months in the apocalypse, she would naturally abandon her naivety. She wouldn't dream of becoming his girlfriend, let alone his wife, and then try to drive all the other women away from Xiao Ran's side. When the 3 days were up, Lu Yang was finally caught. He was captured alive. However, he was severely injured. His right arm was broken, hanging at an unnatural angle. His left eye was blinded, and his nose and the corners of his mouth were bloody. It looked like he'd taken quite a beating. Xiao Ran kept his promise, gave out some food, and then had everyone leave. Liu Yang, surprisingly, hadn't given up. Xiao Ran, he said, you don't actually have to kill me. You have immense power, and I have sharp mind. I can help you manage those people. These are chaotic times, and chaotic times breed heroes. With my help, you could even become an emperor. He spoke as if he believed it himself, his one good eye gleaming with a strange light. In this extreme weather, the country has ceased to exist. So, ambitious men like us can certainly contend for supremacy and vie for that throne. Have you been watching too many TV dramas? Even using terms like ambitious men? Xiao Ran smiled faintly. First, I don't have such grand ambitions, dreaming of becoming an emperor. I can't even be bothered to manage this small residential complex. Second, who knows when this extreme weather will end? How do you plan to unify the country, let alone the world? You can't even make it out of the complex. Stop spouting nonsense to me here. Liu Yang, I'll ask you just one thing. Do you regret making an enemy of me? Liu Yang had a nod. I regret it. My biggest mistake was provoking you. Xiao Ran smiled. Exactly. So you should repent properly. With that, he shot a stone from his dimensional space. Thwack! It slammed into Liu Yang's left kneecap. Arg! Liu Yang let out an utterly wretched scream. Looking at his left leg, the thigh and calf were almost separated, a bloody, mangled mess. Xiao Ran continued to fire stones. After a few more hits, Liu Yang's screams gradually stopped. He was dead. Xiao Ran wasn't doing this purely to torture him to death. He was testing the power of his kinetic stones. It was quite impressive. In terms of raw damage, bullets were actually far inferior. Of course, bullets had the advantage of speed, which the kinetic stones couldn't match. Xiao Ran nodded and returned to his villa. From now on, he wouldn't bother with the people in the complex anymore. There was no need for further interaction. So, these neighbors would eventually be forced by thirst to leave the complex. The supplies he had given them contained only food, no water. One should know, a person can survive at least a week without food. But without water? 3 to 4 days. Of course, he did it on purpose. You know my secret, and you're no longer useful. Naturally, there's no reason for you to live. Selfish? Cruel? Sorry, this was the apocalypse. Xiao Ran didn't have any sympathy to spare. Sure enough, the next day, someone came to Xiao Ran, begging him for some water. When Xiao Ran ignored him, the person even offered to trade food for clean water, only to be ignored again. The man became hysterical, cursing for a while before being forced to leave. By noon, a total of 19 people had come to Xiao Ran asking for water. Why should Xiao Ran give him water? Am I your father or your mother? This was the apocalypse. Not actively harming others was already the greatest kindness. Enthusiastically helping others? Please, those idiots were long dead. Do you think I'm cruel? Xiao Ran asked his 9 women. Su Qingmei was the first to respond, a cold smile on her face. If you ask me, we should have taken the initiative and killed them all. Ha! She had seen too much cruelty in prison, making her the most ruthless and cold-hearted. Wong Lulu was equally cold. If they're pitiful, then who will pity my son? She had now realized her son had likely been taken and used as food. Therefore, this woman naturally held no goodwill towards anyone in the complex. Han Yin also nodded. We have no obligation to help them. Besides, if we help them this time, what about next time? A small favor earns gratitude. A large one breeds resentment. Xiao Ran would have to keep supporting them indefinitely. If one day he decided not to, they wouldn't be grateful. Instead, they'd harbor resentment. That's human nature for you, Zhao Yansu said contemptuously. As a consummate schemer, she naturally lacked sympathy and, even more so, goodwill. Yun Nuantong and Jiang Yuning both opened their mouths to speak, but in the end, it turned into a sigh. Indeed, were there any good people left now? If you saved them, who knew if they wouldn't turn around and stab you in the back? Su Xinran couldn't help but nod. She always followed her sister's lead. And Zhang Jingya and Zhonglei? Naturally, they would have even fewer objections. Xiao Ran nodded inwardly. If anyone had jumped out at this moment spouting some holier-than-thou rhetoric, then sorry, no matter who you were, you could get lost immediately. Fortunately, even Yun Nuantong and Jiang Yuning, who had the strongest moral compasses, only sighed and said nothing. This showed they had deeply understood the cruelty of the apocalypse and no longer held any illusions about human nature. By the afternoon, Xiao Ran saw people, wrapped in thick quilts, rushing out of the complex. Since Xiao Ran wouldn't give them water, they had no choice but to risk it all. However, the nearby convenience stores and supermarkets had already been visited by Xiao Ran. Even the toilet paper had been cleared out. They were destined to find absolutely nothing. and if they stayed outside for too long, they would never be able to return. Farewell, my neighbors. Take my secret to your graves. Xiao Ran stood by the window, his expression calm.